This is 3 hours of SpongeBob lore to fall asleep to. Let's get started with SpongeBob's Pineapple House Explained. So, SpongeBob lives in a pineapple. Just a pineapple sitting on the ocean floor, like that's totally normal. And you know what? The show acts like it is. Right from the very first episode, the French narrator drops this bombshell like it's the most natural thing in the world. He's doing his whole nature documentary thing, talking about the sea and Bikini Bottom, and then he just casually mentions that SpongeBob lives in a pineapple. Yes, of course he lives in a pineapple, you silly. That's it. Just drops it on you without any context whatsoever about why a sea sponge would choose fruit as his housing situation. The narrator literally calls you silly for even questioning it. Like you're the weird one for thinking it's strange that someone would live inside produce underwater. The confidence in his voice is what sells it. He's just stating a fact about the natural world as if living in pineapples is something marine biologists have been documenting for years. The French narrator has that David Attenborough energy where whatever he says becomes truth just because he said it with enough authority. This pretty much sets up everything about SpongeBob. They don't bother explaining why their world is nuts because in their world, it's totally normal. It's just another Tuesday in Bikini Bottom where real estate agents show fruits to people looking for houses. The French narrator's got that super confident documentary voice that makes you believe whatever he's saying. So when he says, of course, SpongeBob lives in a pineapple, your brain just goes with it. Of course he does. Where else would he live? Like some boring underwater house made of coral? That'd be weird. But here's where things get really wild. The pineapple is basically indestructible. Well, destructible, but with built-in resurrection powers. In Home Sweet Pineapple, these little worm things called nematodes show up and literally drink SpongeBob's entire house. They suck it dry like it's a juice box until there's nothing left but this tiny seed on the ground. The nematodes are probably the most bizarre villains in the entire show, and that's saying something. They're not evil or trying to hurt anyone, they're just really, really thirsty. They hop around in a group chanting walking, walking, walking until they spot something they want to drink, then it becomes thirsty, thirsty, thirsty. They're like a flash mob of dehydrated worms with a hive mind. What makes them even weirder is how polite they are about destroying SpongeBob's life. They don't break down the door or cause a scene, they just quietly stick their little straws through the walls and start sipping. SpongeBob and Gary sleep through the whole thing because the nematodes are basically silent house demolition experts. SpongeBob wakes up thinking he's grown huge because his room is shrinking around him. Turns out, nope, his house is just getting consumed by thirsty worms. The whole thing gets slurped up while he's sleeping. Everything, his bed, his furniture, Gary's food bowl, that foghorn alarm clock, all of it just disappears into these little creatures who apparently have the digestive capacity of a small army. The scene where SpongeBob figures out what's happening is pretty creepy if you really think about it. He wakes up on what seems like a normal morning until he sees his room getting smaller. Gary's meowing like something's wrong, but SpongeBob just thinks they've both grown huge overnight. The walls are closing in, and SpongeBob's excited about it until he realizes what's actually going on. These nematodes are basically tiny wrecking crews. They work together like ants, drinking every drop of pineapple juice until there's nothing left to hold the house up. The house slowly deflates as they drain it. By the time they're done, even SpongeBob's door is gone. They leave behind this tiny seed like they're doing him a favor or something. The really messed up part is how satisfied they look when they're done. They all burp in unison and hop away like they just had the meal of their lives. They completely destroyed someone's home and they're happy about it. Then they just disappear and never show up again in the series. One-time house destroyers who got their fill and moved on. So now SpongeBob's homeless. He picks up this little pebble that's all that's left of his house and gets ready to move back in with his parents. But then he starts crying, because of course he does, and one tear hits that pebble. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking and this massive vine shoots up, grows a brand new pineapple house, and drops it exactly where the old one was. But get this, when SpongeBob goes inside, everything's back exactly how it was. His furniture, his decorations, even Gary's newspapers are in the right spots. The show doesn't explain how a plant grew SpongeBob's alarm clock or how his treasure chest sprouted from a seed. It just did. That's Pineapple House logic for you. The vine immediately retreats underground like my work here is done, and that's that. SpongeBob's house can literally regrow itself from a single seed. It's like having the ultimate home insurance policy, except instead of money, you just need tears and basic gardening. And nobody questions this. Patrick sees the house regrow and he's just like, oh cool, SpongeBob's back. Squidward gets crushed by it and he's annoyed but not surprised. Even SpongeBob's parents roll with it. In Bikini Bottom, magical fruit houses are apparently standard architecture. What's really wild is watching Squidward during all this. When SpongeBob's house gets destroyed, Squidward is absolutely thrilled. He's dancing around celebrating the fact that his annoying neighbor might have to move away. But when the house regrows and drops on top of him, and he's clearly mad that SpongeBob's back, the magical regeneration is less surprising to him than temporary peace and quiet. But the real kicker comes later in Truth or Square when we finally get the origin story. And boy, is it anticlimactic in the best way possible. The pineapple just fell off a boat. That's it. Some ship was passing overhead, probably carrying produce, and one pineapple fell overboard. It sank down to the ocean floor and landed right on Squidward's garden. The whole origin story is so random it hurts. Picture this: some cargo ship is just cruising along the surface, probably carrying fruit to who knows where. Maybe the crew is having lunch, maybe someone left a crate unsecured. Maybe it was just a really bumpy day. Whatever happened, one pineapple goes overboard and starts sinking toward the ocean floor like the world's most ridiculous meteorite. Meanwhile, Squidward's down there living his best life. He's got this nice little garden where he's probably growing sea tomatoes or underwater lettuce or whatever passes for vegetables in Bikini Bottom. He's watering his plants, enjoying the peace and quiet, probably thinking about how great it is to live in a neighborhood without any annoying neighbors. Then wham! Pineapple from space ruins everything. Squidward had this nice little garden going where SpongeBob's house sits now. He was probably growing sea vegetables or whatever counts as plants down there. Then thunk pineapple from the sky ruins his whole setup. Squidward gets trapped inside this fallen fruit and has to cut his way out. His garden's destroyed, his peaceful morning is ruined, and this weird yellow sponge shows up with a real estate agent. The flashback shows SpongeBob house hunting with what looks like a professional realtor. They're checking out all sorts of places. There's a shoe house, a castle in a fishbowl, even a toilet house that SpongeBob immediately rejects. The guy has standards, apparently. But when they stumble across this fresh pineapple that just fell from above, SpongeBob's eyes light up like he's found buried treasure. What's funny is watching the real estate agent's reaction. She's probably shown hundreds of underwater houses, coral formations, sunken ships, fancy shell mansions. But when this pineapple drops out of nowhere and SpongeBob immediately wants it, she just rolls with it. That's probably the easiest sale she's ever made. No haggling over price, no home inspection, no asking about the structural integrity of fruit-based housing. SpongeBob sees it and wants it. Transaction complete. SpongeBob takes one look at this pineapple that just randomly fell from above and goes, "I'll take it." The real estate agent barely had to do any selling. SpongeBob hands over a bag of money and moves in immediately. It was probably the easiest commission she ever made. Think about how bizarre this is. A pineapple falls into the ocean by complete accident. A sponge sees it and decides that's his dream home. He buys it on the spot and moves in with his pet snail. This becomes his permanent address. 124 Conch Street is now a pineapple because SpongeBob said so. The show presents this chain of events like it makes perfect sense. Fruit falls, Sponge buys fruit, Sponge lives in fruit. That's just normal underwater home ownership. The flashback doesn't treat it as weird or magical or destined. It's just what happened. SpongeBob needed a house, a pineapple needed a resident, problem solved. This is what makes SpongeBob so brilliant at world building without actually building anything. They don't explain why pineapples work as houses underwater. They don't justify how SpongeBob can breathe inside a fruit, or how the fruit doesn't rot, or how any of this makes biological sense. They just show you a sponge living in a pineapple and move on. The internal logic of Bikini Bottom is completely consistent even when it's completely insane. Fish drive boats underwater, campfires burn on the ocean floor, beaches exist at the bottom of the sea, and sponges live in pineapples. These things should all be impossible, but in this world they all work perfectly fine. Look at SpongeBob's neighbors. Patrick lives under a rock, literally the dumbest housing situation possible, which fits him perfectly. Squidward lives in a moai head because he thinks he's sophisticated and artistic. Mr. Krabs lives in an anchor because he's nautical and old-fashioned. Everyone's house matches their personality, but they're all completely ridiculous if you think about them for more than 2 seconds. But SpongeBob's pineapple is different because it's both the weirdest and somehow the most normal. Pineapples are sweet, tropical, and cheerful just like SpongeBob. They're also tough on the outside but soft on the inside, which works as a metaphor if you're into that kind of thing. But mostly, it's just a pineapple because SpongeBob lives in a pineapple, and that's how it's always been. The French narrator established this in episode 1, and the show never looked back. They could have spent seasons explaining the science of underwater fruit architecture or the economics of produce-based real estate. Instead, They just said, "He lives in a pineapple, deal with it," and focused on telling jokes. This approach makes everything else in the show possible. If you can accept that someone lives in a pineapple underwater, then you can accept anything. Talking starfish? Sure. Underwater beaches? Why not? Secret formulas that turn fish into raving lunatics? Absolutely. The Pineapple House is like a test if you can handle this level of nonsense. Welcome to Bikini Bottom. Even when the house gets destroyed in various episodes, it always comes back. Sometimes it regrows, sometimes it gets rebuilt, sometimes SpongeBob pulls a new one out of a can. The specific house doesn't matter, because the idea of the house is indestructible. SpongeBob lives in a pineapple, and that's not gonna chance. In Home Sweet Rubble, the house starts falling apart from age and wear. SpongeBob's friends try to help fix it up, but they all add their own personal touches that completely change what makes it SpongeBob's space. Sandy adds high-tech gadgets, Mr. Krabs puts in money-making features, and it all falls apart because it's not really SpongeBob's house anymore. But Gary had been carrying around a can the whole time, a can of furnished pineapple, that pops open into a perfect new house when SpongeBob needs it most. Think about that. Canned pineapple houses. You can apparently buy a whole furnished home in a can at the grocery store in Bikini Bottom. Gary knew this the entire time but couldn't communicate it because he's a snail. The show treats this like it's totally reasonable consumer goods you'd find at any underwater supermarket. The house has adapted over the years to whatever the story needs. Sometimes it's got a basement that shouldn't exist in a fruit. Sometimes there's an attic where SpongeBob stores old junk. The layout changes constantly because the Pineapple House is about being SpongeBob's space in the world. The show handles the house's destruction and rebirth in this really sweet way. Every time it gets destroyed, there's this moment where it looks like SpongeBob might have to leave Bikini Bottom forever. His whole life is tied up in that pineapple. But it always comes back, usually in the most ridiculous way possible because SpongeBob belongs there, and somehow everything works out. The show has run for over 2 decades, and they've never felt the need to explain why any of this makes sense. The Pineapple House works because it works. SpongeBob is happy there, Gary has enough space for his newspapers, and it keeps the rain out. What more do you need from a home? That's the genius of starting with something so ridiculous. Once you've established that pineapples are valid housing, everything else becomes possible. The show never has to explain its logic because it established from day one that logic is optional. The French narrator told us SpongeBob lives in a pineapple, SpongeBob lives in a pineapple, and that's that. Sometimes the best world building is the kind that doesn't build anything at all. It just presents its world as fact and dares you to disagree. SpongeBob's Pineapple House is weird, impossible, and perfect, just like everything else in Bikini Bottom. Now let's move on to every Krabby Patty formula theory ever. But don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The Krabby Patty secret formula is probably the biggest mystery in all of SpongeBob. Everyone wants to know what makes these burgers so addictive that fish will literally riot outside the Krusty Krab when they can't get them. From the very beginning, the show made it clear that this formula is serious business. Mr. Krabs treats it like nuclear codes, SpongeBob guards it with his life, and Plankton has spent decades trying to steal it. But after watching all these episodes where characters hunt for the formula, you start to notice some weird stuff that doesn't add up. The whole thing started in the early episodes where Plankton would show up with increasingly ridiculous schemes to get his hands on the recipe. In Plankton, he literally crawls inside SpongeBob's brain to control him like a puppet. That's some serious dedication to a burger recipe. But what's wild is how the show handles the actual formula itself. Let's talk about what we actually know from the episodes. In Plankton, SpongeBob gives us this super specific description of a Krabby Patty when he's trying to resist Plankton's mind control. He talks about the 100% all-secret patty, secretly assembled with undersea cheese, pickles, lettuce, tomato, onion, all secretly steaming between 2 fluffy seaweed sea buns. That sounds pretty normal, right? Like a regular burger with sea-themed ingredients. But then in Imitation Krabs, things get weird. SpongeBob says the formula is kept in a bottle and that there are all these crazy rules about when you can discuss it. He mentions this super specific scenario about if we're discussing the secret formula on the 3rd Wednesday in January and it's not raining outside, after we've gargled with vanilla pudding. What kind of formula needs those kinds of conditions to talk about? The whole secrecy thing is what makes people suspicious. SpongeBob tells that fake robot Mr. Krabs that the Krabby Patty formula is the sole property of the Krusty Krab and is only to be discussed in part or in whole with its creator, Mr. Krabs. Duplication of this formula is punishable by law. That's some serious legal language for a fast food recipe. Then you've got the physical security around this thing. In Imitation Crabs, the Krusty Krab goes into full lockdown mode when Plankton shows up. Sirens, metal doors, and windows, Squidward up in a crow's nest with a telescope. They're treating this like a military operation for a burger recipe. But here's where it gets really suspicious. The formula seems to change depending on what the episode needs. Sometimes it's in SpongeBob's head, sometimes it's written in a bottle, sometimes Mr. Krabs acts like only he knows it. The consistency just isn't there. Watch how SpongeBob acts when he's protecting the formula. In Plankton, he's got the whole thing memorized and can describe every ingredient. But in Imitation Crabs, he suddenly doesn't know the formula at all and says it's locked away in a bottle. Which is it? Does SpongeBob know the formula, or doesn't he? The show can't seem to make up its mind about who actually knows what. Sometimes SpongeBob acts like he's never heard the formula before. Other times he's reciting ingredients like he makes these things every day. Mr. Krabs sometimes acts like he's the only one who knows the secret, but then SpongeBob will casually mention parts of it. And let's talk about some of the fan theories that have popped up over the years. The darkest one is that the secret ingredient is crab meat. Think about it. Mr. Krabs is a crab running a burger joint in a world where sea creatures eat other sea creatures. The theory goes that he's literally selling his own kind, which would explain why the formula is so secret and why the burgers are so addictive. Pretty dark for a kid's show, but it would make sense. This theory gets darker when you think about Mr. Krabs' obsession with money. What if he's not just selling crab meat, but specifically selling other crabs? In a world where everyone's a sea creature, that would be like running a human burger joint. The secret is that he's basically committing cannibalism for profit. Then there's the love theory. In FUN, SpongeBob literally befriends Plankton, and they sing about friendship and having fun together. Some fans think the secret ingredient is just love or friendship. That SpongeBob makes the patties special because he genuinely cares about making people happy. It's sweet, but kind of undermines the whole mystery aspect. The love theory actually has some evidence in the episodes. Watch how SpongeBob makes Krabby Patties compared to how other characters do it. SpongeBob always seems genuinely happy to be cooking. He's singing, he's dancing, he's putting his whole heart into every burger. When other characters try to make them, they always come out wrong. But here's the problem with the love theory. If love is the secret ingredient, why does Mr. Krabs act like it's this huge secret that needs to be protected? You can't patent love. You can't lock up friendship in a bottle. The whole security apparatus around the formula doesn't make sense if the secret is just being nice. The weirdest theory involves Plankton himself. Some people think the secret ingredient is actually plankton tears, or that plankton is somehow necessary for the formula to work. This one's pretty out there, but it would explain why Mr. Krabs keeps him around instead of just getting rid of him permanently. Think about it, Plankton has been trying to steal the formula for decades. Mr. Krabs could easily have him arrested, banned from Bikini Bottom, or just squished. But he never does. He always launches Plankton back to the chum bucket instead of actually solving the problem. What if that's because Plankton is actually part of the solution? This theory suggests that Mr. Krabs needs Plankton's failed attempts to harvest something from him. Maybe it's his tears when he fails, maybe it's his anger and frustration, maybe it's just his presence creating the right competitive environment. But something about having Plankton around is essential to making the Krabby Patties work. The evidence for this is how the Krusty Krab operates. They have this whole ritual around Plankton's failed schemes. He shows up, causes chaos, gets defeated, and gets launched back home. It happens so often it's basically part of the restaurant's routine. What if it's not coincidence but necessity? But here's the theory that actually makes the most sense when you watch these episodes. What if there is no secret formula at all? What if it's all just marketing? Think about it. Mr. Krabs is obsessed with money and knows how to run a business. Creating mystery around your product is marketing 101. People always want what they can't have. By making this huge deal about a secret formula, he's created artificial demand. Everyone thinks these burgers are special because they're told they're special. Look at how Mr. Krabs handles the whole thing. He's always talking about how the formula must be protected, but he also seems pretty casual about it sometimes. In Imitation Crabs, he's more worried about the penny rolling around than he is about Plankton being in his restaurant. That doesn't seem like someone genuinely protecting the world's most valuable recipe. And SpongeBob's description in Plankton just sounds like a regular burger. Cheese, pickles, lettuce, tomato, onion, buns. That's not revolutionary. That's a normal burger. But because everyone's been told it's made with a secret formula, they think it tastes amazing. The genius of this theory is that it makes Mr. Krabs even smarter than we thought. He's protecting a brand. The formula doesn't need to exist because the idea of the formula is what sells the burgers. This also explains why Plankton can never successfully steal it. You can't steal something that doesn't exist. Every time he gets close to the truth, there's nothing actually there to find. His whole business model is based on trying to copy something that's just regular ingredients with good marketing. Watch how the show handles moments when Plankton almost gets the formula. In Plankton, he gets so distracted by SpongeBob's description of the patty that he literally jumps into the analyzer himself. The machine reads him as 1% evil, 99% hot gas. That's basically the show saying Plankton is all hype and substance, just like the formula he's chasing. In FUN, Plankton actually gets a Krabby Patty, but when he tries to run away with it, he crashes into a concrete wall and gets squished. The patty gets destroyed and he gains nothing. It's like the universe is telling him he's chasing something that doesn't matter. Even when Plankton successfully infiltrates the Krusty Krab and imitation Krabs, he still fails. He builds this elaborate robot suit, fools everyone including SpongeBob, and gets handed the formula bottle. But then SpongeBob accidentally activates a self-destruct mechanism and the whole thing explodes. Plankton loses everything and learns nothing. The pattern is always the same. Plankton gets close to success, something goes wrong, and he ends up back where he started. After decades of this, you have to wonder if the game is rigged. What if the formula he's chasing is just a carrot on a stick that keeps him running in circles? This theory explains so many weird things about the show. Why does the Krusty Krab have such elaborate security for a burger joint? Because the security is part of the show. It makes people think there's something valuable to protect. Why do the ingredients SpongeBob lists sound so normal? Because they are normal. The secret is just regular food prepared well and marketed brilliantly. Why can't other characters replicate Krabby Patties even when they have access to the same kitchen and ingredients? Because they don't have the confidence and enthusiasm that comes from believing you're making something special. The whole thing is a brilliant commentary on consumer culture. People will line up for hours and pay premium prices for something just because they're told it's special. The Krabby Patty works because everyone believes it works, and Mr. Krabs knows this. He's protecting the illusion that there's something to protect. The real secret is the understanding that perception is more powerful than reality when it comes to selling stuff. This theory also explains why the show never actually reveals the formula after all these years. There's nothing to reveal. The mystery is the product. Once you explain how a magic trick works, it stops being magical. Look at how other characters react to Krabby Patties throughout the series. They're obsessed with them. They'll fight other customers for them. They'll break down when the restaurant is closed. They'll follow SpongeBob around just hoping to get one. That's not normal behavior for a burger, even a really good one. But it is normal behavior for something you've been told is exclusive, special, and impossible to get anywhere else. The Krabby Patty has become more than food. It's become a status symbol, a cultural phenomenon, a shared obsession that defines the entire community of Bikini Bottom. Mr. Krabs has created the perfect business model. He's selling regular food at premium prices because everyone believes it's premium food. He's got customers lined up around the block for burgers that probably cost him pennies to make. And the best part is that his biggest competitor is chasing a secret that doesn't exist instead of just making better food. Plankton could probably put the Krusty Krab out of business tomorrow if he just focused on improving his chum instead of stealing formulas. But he's so convinced that there's some magic ingredient he's missing that he never stops to think, maybe the magic is just good business sense. The formula mystery has become so ingrained in Bikini Bottom culture that even when characters get close to the truth, they can't see it. In Imitation Krabs, SpongeBob has to go through this elaborate ritual with the fake Mr. Krabs before he'll even consider sharing the formula. They do a secret handshake that involves standing on one foot, balancing chocolate milk on their heads, and singing the Bikini Bottom national anthem. Then they have to eat spaghetti and do more weird stuff for hours. All of this ceremony around the formula makes it seem more important than it actually is. If the secret really was just a list of ingredients, why would you need all these rituals? The rituals exist to make the formula feel sacred and special, not because there's actually anything sacred about it. Even the legal language SpongeBob recites sounds made up. Duplication of this formula is punishable by law. Restrictions apply, results may vary. That last part sounds like fine print from a commercial, not serious legal protection for a trade secret. The show keeps giving us hints that the whole thing might be fake, but the characters are so invested in believing it's real that they ignore the evidence. SpongeBob can describe every ingredient in the patty, but he still thinks there's some mysterious secret he doesn't know about. Mr. Krabs acts like the formula is priceless, but he also uses it as an excuse to put SpongeBob through ridiculous tests and challenges. The Krabby Patty formula works as a plot device because it gives every character something to want. Plankton wants it to save his failing business. SpongeBob wants to protect it to prove his loyalty. Mr. Krabs wants to keep it secret to maintain his competitive advantage. But what if they're all chasing something that was never there to begin with? The real genius of Mr. Krabs' ice is creating a myth so powerful that everyone in town believes it without question. The formula doesn't need to be real because the belief in the formula is what makes the business work. So when you watch SpongeBob and see Plankton trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula, remember that he might be chasing something that never existed in the first place. And Mr. Krabs is laughing all the way to the bank while selling regular burgers at premium prices because everyone thinks they're getting something special. The real secret formula is making people believe there's a secret formula at all. Now let's talk about why Squidward's life is sadder than you think. Squidward Tentacles might be the most depressing character in all of SpongeBob. Everyone thinks he's just a grumpy neighbor who hates fun, but when you really look at his episodes, you realize he's actually a broken man, watching his dreams die in real time. Squidward represents every adult who had artistic dreams and watched them get crushed by reality. He's the guy who thought he'd be famous by now, living in a tiny house and working retail while younger, less talented people seem to succeed effortlessly around him. Sound familiar? The thing about Squidward is that he never stopped believing he was meant for greatness. In Artist Unknown, he gets so excited about teaching art that he literally imagines having museum wings named after him. This is a guy who genuinely believes he has something important to offer the world, even after years of evidence to the contrary. When Squidward opens that art class, he's practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. He's calling himself Professor of Art and talking about shaping people into his image. He says he'll go down in history, and that someday there will be a wing with my name on it in all the museums of the world. But then reality kicks in when literally everyone who signed up leaves because they thought it was a cooking class. Everyone except SpongeBob. This is where things get really sad. Squidward has to teach art to the one person he considers completely talentless, but SpongeBob immediately starts creating masterpieces without even trying. SpongeBob draws a perfect circle by first drawing a realistic human head and then erasing it down to a circle. That's backwards and insane, but it works perfectly. Then SpongeBob takes a hammer to a piece of marble and creates a perfect sculpture that looks exactly like Michelangelo's David. Squidward, who has been studying art his whole life, can't do anything close to that level. Watching SpongeBob effortlessly create what Squidward has always dreamed of making is probably the most painful thing that could happen to him. But here's the really messed up part. When the famous art collector Monty P. Moneybags shows up and sees SpongeBob's sculpture, Squidward can't handle that someone else might get the recognition he's always wanted. So he puts his own nose on the sculpture and tries to claim credit for it. Even when faced with genuine artistic genius, Squidward can't just appreciate it. He has to make it about himself. The art collector is blown away by the sculpture, calling it angelic form with amazing detail and perfect censorship. He says it's the work of a true genius and promises the artist will have fame and fortune and anything his heart desires. Squidward immediately gets excited, imagining himself with fame, fortune, and even hair. But when he tries to move the sculpture, the head breaks off and crumbles into pieces. When the sculpture gets broken and Moneybags asks Squidward to make another one, Squidward panics. He knows he can't recreate what SpongeBob did, so he goes to find SpongeBob at the dump. But when he tries to get SpongeBob to make art again, something horrible happens. SpongeBob has lost his natural ability because Squidward made him follow the rules of art. This is the cruelest irony. Squidward destroys the very talent he was trying to exploit by forcing it into his rigid framework of how art should be made. SpongeBob starts drawing crooked circles and can only make piles of rubble when he tries to sculpt. The magic is gone because Squidward convinced him that there's only one right way to make art. By the end of Artist Unknown, Squidward has a complete mental breakdown. He starts destroying everything in the art classroom, eating pieces of marble, smashing sculptures, and screaming with frustration. The episode ends with Squidward accidentally creating a beautiful sculpture during his breakdown, but he doesn't even realize it because he storms out before seeing what he made. The janitor gets all the credit and becomes famous as the greatest artist who ever lived. This pattern repeats throughout Squidward's life. He gets close to success, something goes wrong, and he ends up worse than before. In Squidville, he finally escapes SpongeBob and Patrick and moves to a community full of other octopuses who appreciate art and culture. Everyone rides bikes in formation, shops at health food stores, takes interpretive dance classes, and plays clarinet in groups. They even have canned bread, which Squidward gets excited about. This is exactly what Squidward always said he wanted. A place where he could be around his own kind, away from the chaos of SpongeBob and Patrick. But after a few days, the routine becomes soul-crushing. Every day is exactly the same. Same bike ride, same canned bread purchase, same dance class, same clarinet trio. Squidward starts getting more and more depressed with each loop until he's completely miserable. The thing he thought he wanted turned out to be a prison. The show literally shows us Squidward's happiness draining away day by day. At first, he's saying things like, "This town is great, and it just gets better and better." But by the 7th day, he's frowning. By the 9th day, the music becomes distorted and creepy. By the 12th day, he's completely depressed and tells the clarinet trio, "I sort of don't feel like playing my clarinet today." When Squidward finds that reef blower in the park, he can't resist playing with it. And for the first time in the episode, he looks genuinely happy. He's laughing and having fun, acting exactly like SpongeBob and Patrick did in the beginning. But the other octopuses are horrified. They think playing with a reef blower is childish and immature. This is the real tragedy of Squidward's character. He's naturally attracted to fun and silliness, but he's convinced himself that those things are beneath him. When he finally lets loose and has fun in Squidville, the other sophisticated octopuses reject him completely. He's too immature for the art crowd, but too pretentious for the fun crowd. He doesn't belong anywhere. One octopus calls playing with a reef blower the most childish thing I've ever heard of, which is exactly what Squidward said to SpongeBob and Patrick at the beginning of the episode. But when another octopus asks, "How could you possibly have fun with one of those oversized hair dryers?" Squidward answers just like SpongeBob would. Like this. He's become the thing he used to hate. Band Geeks gives us maybe the clearest picture of Squidward's inner life. His old rival Squilliam calls and basically rubs his success in Squidward's face. Squilliam has everything Squidward always wanted: fame, fortune, respect, and a successful musical career. Meanwhile, Squidward is working at a fast food restaurant. The phone call with Squilliam is devastating. Squilliam calls Squidward's clarinet playing the sound of a dying animal and mentions that he's leading a big fancy band that's playing the Bubble Bowl. When Squilliam says he's living your dreams, Squidward, you can hear the pain in Squidward's voice as he struggles to respond. When Squidward lies and says he has a band too, Squilliam immediately calls his bluff. "I knew it! You don't even have a band!" This is probably Squidward's worst nightmare, having his high school rival confirm that he's a failure who never amounted to anything. Squidward's response is pure desperation. He doubles down on the lie and promises that his band will play the Bubble Bowl. This is a man who would rather face public humiliation than admit failure to his high school rival. That's some serious psychological damage. When Squidward tries to put together a marching band, everything goes wrong immediately. Nobody has any musical experience, Patrick asks if mayonnaise is an instrument, and the flag twirlers literally explode in a blimp accident, killing 3 people. Squidward just curls up in a fetal position while someone plays taps for the dead flag twirlers. The band practices get worse every day. Plankton can't play harmonica and passes out from exhaustion. The whole group gets into a massive fight where they use their instruments as weapons. Mrs. Puff slams Mr. Krabs and another fish with cymbals, and everyone is basically trying to kill each other with musical instruments. After the fight, Squidward gives this heartbreaking speech. "Well, you did it. You took my one chance in happiness and crushed it. Crushed it into little tiny bite-sized pieces. I really had expected better of you people. I guess I'm a loser for that, too." Then he starts crying and tells everyone not to bother showing up because he'll just tell them they all died in a marching accident. This moment shows how desperate Squidward really is. He calls this his one chance in happiness. After decades of failure, he thought maybe this time would be different. But when it falls apart like everything else in his life, he blames himself for being naive enough to hope. But then something amazing happens. SpongeBob rallies the band together and they end up performing Sweet Victory at the Bubble Bowl. For once in his life, Squidward actually succeeds at something. He beats his rival Squilliam, who literally has a heart attack from shock and gets carried away on a stretcher. Squidward finally gets his moment of triumph. Except here's the thing about Squidward's rare victories. They only happen when he stops trying so hard and lets other people help him. In Artist Unknown, his best work happens during a mental breakdown when he's not thinking about technique. In Band Geeks, the performance only works because SpongeBob takes over and motivates everyone else. Squidward's tragedy is that he's actually talented, but his desperation and bitterness get in the way of his success. He's so focused on getting recognition and beating other people that he forgets why he loved art and music in the first place. When he does succeed, it's always when he stops performing and starts genuinely expressing himself. The saddest part about Squidward is that he represents all the people who had dreams but got stuck in jobs they hate, surrounded by people they don't understand. He's the adult in a world full of children, the pessimist surrounded by optimists, the artist trapped in a commercial world. He wants to create beauty, but he's stuck making fast food. And the really cruel part is that SpongeBob, the person who annoys him most, is actually living the life Squidward wants. SpongeBob found something he loves doing, and he does it with passion every single day. He doesn't care about money or recognition or impressing other people. He just wants to make good food and make people happy. Squidward could have that same contentment if he could let go of his need for external validation. But he's so caught up in comparing himself to other people and trying to prove his worth that he can't enjoy the things he's actually good at. His clarinet playing might not be concert level, but he genuinely enjoys it when he's not worried about what other people think. The show keeps giving us glimpses of who Squidward could be if he wasn't so bitter. In Band Geeks, when the performance is working, Squidward looks genuinely happy for the first time in years. In Squidville, the brief moment when he's playing with the reef blower shows us the playful person buried under all that cynicism. But most of the time, Squidward is trapped by his own expectations and resentments. He's the most human character in SpongeBob because he deals with the same disappointments and compromises that most adults face. He had dreams. Those dreams didn't work out the way he planned, and now he's just trying to get through each day without losing his mind completely. That's what makes Squidward's story so sad. He's just tired of failing, tired of being disappointed, tired of watching other people succeed where he couldn't. He's a cautionary tale about what happens when you let bitterness consume your capacity for joy. But every now and then, the show gives us hope that maybe Squidward can still find happiness. Maybe he'll have another moment like Band Geeks where everything comes together. Maybe he'll learn to appreciate the small pleasures in life instead of chasing impossible dreams. Maybe he'll realize that being ordinary isn't the worst thing in the world. Until then, Squidward remains the most relatable character in Bikini Bottom. The one who reminds us that growing up doesn't have to mean giving up, but sometimes it feels like it does. Now let's discuss the mystery of Glove World. But before I tell you about that, subscribe to our channel. Glove World is basically SpongeBob's version of Disneyland. It's this magical theme park where SpongeBob and Patrick go whenever they want to feel like kids again. But when you really look at the episodes about Glove World, there's something darker going on beneath all the colorful rides and mascot costumes. The park represents pure childhood wonder in SpongeBob's world. Every time he talks about going there, he lights up like a little kid on Christmas morning. SpongeBob literally dreams about the place, and even his nightmares about the dangerous rides can't stop him from being excited. That's the power Glove World has over him. But there's this weird contrast between how SpongeBob sees the park and what's actually happening there. The rides are constantly breaking down, people are getting hurt, and the whole place seems to be falling apart. Yet, SpongeBob keeps going back because he needs that feeling of magic and wonder that only Glove World can give him. The Fiery Fist of Pain episode shows us just how messed up this place really is. The commercial for this new roller coaster is basically a horror movie. They show people getting launched out of the ride, crashes, explosions, and someone screaming as their friend flies off the coaster. Any normal person would see that and think twice about riding it. The warning signs at the ride tell you everything you need to know about this place. The list includes crying, screaming, projectile vomiting, amnesia, spine loss, embarrassing accidents, uncontrollable gas, and explosive diarrhea. That's not a fun ride. That's a torture device. But SpongeBob and Patrick are so caught up in the hype that they ignore how dangerous it actually is. What makes it even weirder is how the park treats these safety issues. The employees act like spine loss is just a normal side effect. When SpongeBob and Patrick finish riding the fiery fist o' pain, an employee hands them their spines like he's returning their personal belongings. The show plays it for laughs, but that's genuinely horrifying when you think about it. The scariest part about Glove World is how it normalizes danger and pain. Kids go there expecting to have fun, but they end up getting traumatized. The park has somehow convinced everyone that getting your spine removed is just part of the experience. That's some serious psychological manipulation right there. The financial side of Glove World tells us a lot about what's really going on. The park is clearly struggling to stay afloat. The rides are falling apart, the safety systems don't work, and they can't afford proper maintenance. But instead of fixing these problems, they just market the danger as part of the thrill. When Glove World finally closes, people are literally escaping with their lives. Visitors call it the worst amusement park they've ever been to, and say the world will be a better place when it's gone. That's not how people talk about a fun family destination. That's how they talk about a death trap. But SpongeBob refuses to see these problems. When he hears Glove World is closing, he acts like the world has gone mad. He can't understand why anyone would want to shut down his magical wonderland. To him, the dangerous rides and constant accidents are features. They're part of what makes the experience exciting and memorable. The park also has this creepy corporate side that SpongeBob doesn't see. Glove World is closing down because they're opening a bigger, better park called Glove Universe. The owner talks about it like it's just business, but for SpongeBob and Patrick, it's like their childhood is being destroyed for profit. This shows how corporate decisions can destroy the things people love. Glove World might be old and broken down, but it has history and meaning for people like SpongeBob. Glove Universe is probably shinier and safer, but it doesn't have the same soul. It's like when your favorite local restaurant gets bought out by a chain and loses everything that made it special. The corporate strategy here is actually pretty smart from a business perspective. Why spend money fixing old, dangerous rides when you can just build a new park and charge people more money to visit it? The company gets to start fresh with better safety systems and modern technology while abandoning all the liability issues from the old park. But this strategy completely ignores the emotional connection people have to the original location. SpongeBob and Patrick are emotionally invested in this specific place. They have memories tied to every broken ride and every dangerous experience. You can't just transfer that kind of attachment to a new location. The really sad part is watching SpongeBob and Patrick try to fix Glove World. They genuinely believe they can save their childhood paradise by making improvements. SpongeBob starts working as a mirror in the Hall of Mirrors, and Patrick becomes the park mascot. But everything they touch makes things worse. SpongeBob accidentally launches people off rides when he tries to make them go faster. Patrick starts chasing visitors with a hammer because he thinks testing their strength will be fun. Their attempts to help end up driving away all the remaining customers. It's like watching someone try to fix their childhood home and accidentally burning it down instead. The whole situation gets even more absurd when SpongeBob and Patrick decide to chain themselves to the park gates to protest the closure. They're literally willing to sacrifice their freedom to save a place that's been trying to kill them for years. That's the power of nostalgia right there. But then the plot twist hits. The owner reveals that they're only closing Glove World because Glove Universe is opening that same night. All their dramatic protesting was for nothing because there's already a replacement ready to go. It's like the corporate world planned this whole thing out in advance. The timing of this reveal is particularly cruel. SpongeBob and Patrick spend the entire day desperately trying to save something that was already doomed from the start. The company never had any intention of keeping Glove World open. They were just milking the last bit of profit out of it before moving on to the next phase of their business plan. The Tunnel of Glove episode gives us maybe the darkest look at what Glove World is really like. This is supposed to be a romantic ride, like the It's a Small World attraction at Disney World, but everything goes wrong in the most terrifying way possible. Pearl and SpongeBob get stuck in the ride when the mechanism breaks down. What should be a cute boat ride through romantic scenes turns into a survival horror experience. The animatronics start malfunctioning and walking toward them like zombies. The cherub's head explodes and robot heads are rolling around everywhere. This episode shows us that even the gentle, family-friendly rides at Glove World are death traps waiting to happen. The romantic boat ride becomes a nightmare because the park's infrastructure is so poorly maintained. The safety systems fail, the power goes out, and the animatronics turn into monsters. The breakdown of the Tunnel of Glove reveals just how deep the park's problems really go. It's not just the extreme rides that are dangerous. Even the kiddie rides designed for romance and gentle fun can kill you if the wrong thing goes wrong at the wrong time. Then Patrick, trying to help, accidentally destroys the power plant that runs the whole ride. He pulls random levers and breaks control systems because he thinks he's rescuing SpongeBob from some kind of imprisonment. His good intentions make everything worse, which is basically a metaphor for how trying to recapture childhood magic often backfires. Patrick's destruction of the power plant shows us another layer of how broken Glove World really is. The fact that one confused starfish can destroy the entire electrical system by accident proves that the park has absolutely no security or safety protocols in place. Any random person could walk into the power plant and cause a disaster. The ride ends up flooding and exploding, launching SpongeBob and Pearl out of the tunnel in their boat. The news treats it like a hostage situation, with helicopters and police surrounding the ride. That's not how theme park rides are supposed to work. That's how disasters work. But here's the thing that makes Glove World so fascinating. Despite all the chaos and danger, SpongeBob never stops loving it. Even Pearl admits the experience was kind of fun after almost dying. There's something about the pure chaos and unpredictability that appeals to people on a basic level. This is what makes Glove World such a perfect metaphor for childhood itself. When you're a kid, everything seems magical and exciting, even the dangerous stuff. You don't notice the safety hazards or the corporate greed or the things that adults worry about. You just see the wonder and possibility. The park also represents how businesses exploit nostalgia for profit. Glove World knows that people like SpongeBob will keep coming back no matter how bad things get because they're chasing the feeling they had when they first visited as kids. The park doesn't need to be good anymore, it just needs to exist. This exploitation of nostalgia is particularly insidious because it targets people's deepest emotional connections. SpongeBob is trying to buy back his childhood, his innocence, his sense of wonder. The park is essentially selling him his own memories and charging premium prices for them. SpongeBob represents that part of us that refuses to grow up and see the world in practical terms. He'd rather ride a broken roller coaster that might kill him than admit that his favorite place isn't as perfect as he remembers. That's both admirable and kind of tragic. The employees at Glove World seem to know how messed up everything is, but they just go along with it because it's their job. The ride operator casually mentions that the cheap roller coaster is always breaking down. The mascot quits mid-shift because he can't take getting kicked by children anymore. Everyone knows the place is falling apart, but nobody wants to be the one to shut it down. The employee turnover at Glove World must be astronomical. Who would want to work at a place where you have to hand people their spines at the end of the day? Where the rides regularly explode and flood? Where customers treat you like garbage because they're frustrated that their childhood paradise is falling apart around them? The mystery of Glove World is really the mystery of growing up. How do you hold on to the things that made you happy as a child when the adult world keeps showing you how flawed and dangerous those things really were? How do you balance nostalgia with reality? Some people, like Pearl's friends, outgrow places like Glove World and move on to more mature interests. Others, like the fish who escape saying they're lucky to be alive, recognize the danger and stay away. But SpongeBob chooses to keep believing in the magic even when the evidence against it keeps piling up. The park's financial troubles and eventual closure represent what happens to childhood institutions in the real world. They get replaced by bigger, more profitable versions that might be technically better, but lack the charm and personality of the originals. Progress kills nostalgia, and there's nothing you can do about it except enjoy what you have while it lasts. Glove World also shows us how dangerous nostalgia can be when it blinds us to real problems. SpongeBob's love for the park makes him ignore obvious safety issues that could seriously hurt people. His childhood wonder becomes a kind of willful ignorance that puts him and others at risk. The fact that Glove World keeps operating despite all its problems says something about how society treats childhood institutions. We're willing to overlook serious flaws if something has enough sentimental value. We'd rather preserve a dangerous memory than admit that maybe some things from the past should stay in the past. There's also something to be said about how Glove World represents the commodification of childhood itself. Every aspect of the park is designed to trigger nostalgic feelings and extract money from visitors. The glove theme ISIS about creating a brand identity that people can form emotional attachments to. The park's marketing strategy relies heavily on creating a sense of tradition and continuity. By calling itself Glove World and sticking with the same themes and mascots for years, it creates the illusion that this is a timeless place that will always be there for you. But as we see when it closes, that sense of permanence is just another marketing illusion. In the end, Glove World works because it captures something true about how we remember childhood. The danger was always there, but we didn't see it because we were too busy having fun. The corporate greed was always there, but we were too young to understand it. The things that scared us as adults were the same things that thrilled us as kids. SpongeBob's relationship with Glove World shows us that maybe the point is that believing in magic makes life more fun, even if it's more dangerous that way. Sometimes the childish choice is also the right choice, even when everyone else tells you to grow up and be practical. That's the real mystery of Glove World. It's not just a theme park, it's a test of whether you're still young enough at heart to believe in magic even when logic tells you not to. Now let's move on to the true story of Mrs. Puff's criminal past. Mrs. Puff is probably the saddest character in all of SpongeBob. She starts out as this nice, patient teacher who just wants to help kids learn to drive safely. But 3 episodes show us how she breaks down and becomes someone who's basically a criminal. And it all starts with one yellow sponge who can't tell which pedal makes the boat go forward. When we first see Mrs. Puff in Hall Monitor, she's already scared of SpongeBob, but she's still trying to be a good teacher. Yet she keeps trying not to pick him as Hall Monitor, saying every other name she can think of. Jimmy already did it. Bill says no. Tina did it 3 times. Beth left school. Mrs. Puff is running out of students, so she doesn't have to give SpongeBob any job. When she finally has to pick him, you can see she's scared. She knows something bad will happen. The thing is, Mrs. Puff used to be different. Back when she first opened her school, she made this promise that she would never give up on any student who wanted to learn. She seemed so happy and ready to help everyone. Then SpongeBob showed up and said hi, and that's when everything started going wrong. You can tell from her face that she already knew this kid was going to be trouble, but she had no idea how much trouble. And she's right to be scared. SpongeBob takes his hall monitor speech so seriously that he talks for hours while everyone falls asleep. The clock disappears from the wall because he talks so long. By the time he's done, school's over and everyone ran out the door and stepped on him. Mrs. Puff feels bad and lets him keep the uniform until tomorrow. That one moment of being nice basically destroys half of Bikini Bottom. Here's the scary part about Mrs. Puff. She's just a regular teacher who wanted to help kids. But SpongeBob is like this force of chaos that breaks everything he touches. Mrs. Puff didn't start out thinking about crime or wanting to hurt anyone. She just wanted to teach driving and maybe get through her day without anything exploding. SpongeBob goes on this crazy trip where he causes a huge car accident, breaks into someone's house while wearing a mask, and gets blamed for being a maniac who's scaring everyone in town. The cops arrest him thinking he's this dangerous criminal. Mrs. Puff shows up and has to tell them that she's the one who gave him the uniform. The cops look at her like it's all her fault. And honestly, it kind of is. The really sad thing is that Mrs. Puff tried to do something nice. She felt bad that SpongeBob missed his chance to be hall monitor, so she let him wear the costume home. But that one small act of kindness led to car crashes, break-ins, and mass panic. This teaches Mrs. Puff a horrible lesson. Being nice to SpongeBob always makes everything worse. This is where something breaks inside Mrs. Puff's brain. She starts to understand that trying to help SpongeBob leads to chaos and people getting hurt. The episode ends with her teaching from jail, telling SpongeBob she wants to see him after class, 6 months from now. She's literally in prison because she tried to be kind to him. From this point on, Mrs. Puff starts thinking like someone who's been in the system. Someone who knows that following the rules just gets you in trouble. No Free Rides shows us Mrs. Puff's first time trying to be a real criminal. She's so desperate to get rid of SpongeBob that she decides to cheat and pass him with fake extra credit. All he has to do is write 3 more words to finish a sentence about what he learned in driving school. Just 3 words. SpongeBob can't even do that simple thing. He breaks his pencil, goes to sharpen it 1,000,000 times, his hand starts cramping, and he ends up drawing little pictures instead of writing words. Mrs. Puff is sweating, shaking, basically losing her mind watching him fail at the easiest task ever. She can see her whole future stretching out ahead of her. Another year of SpongeBob, another year of crashes, another year of going to the hospital. She finally just says he passes anyway because she literally cannot handle spending another year with him. She gives him a license he absolutely doesn't deserve, and right away starts having bad dreams about all the people he's going to hurt. But here's where it gets really messed up. SpongeBob's parents show up at her house later with a brand new boat as a thank you gift. They're so happy and grateful that she never gave up on their son. The dad even kisses her hand and says she's like family now. They have no idea she just lied and cheated to get rid of him. Mrs. Puff knows everyone's going to find out she let him cheat, and then her whole life will be ruined. So Mrs. Puff makes a choice that changes everything. She decides to steal the boat and make it disappear. This is actual theft. She's breaking real laws now. Mrs. Puff becomes a straight-up car thief that night. She puts on a black ski mask like a real criminal, breaks into SpongeBob's boat, and tries to drive it away. When SpongeBob wakes up in the back seat, she actually kicks him out of his own car and keeps driving. She's willing to hurt a kid to cover up what she did. The whole chase scene is crazy because you can see SpongeBob getting dragged through dangerous stuff while Mrs. Puff just keeps going. When SpongeBob finally pulls off her mask and sees it's Mrs. Puff, his whole world falls apart. His teacher, the person he trusts most, is a criminal who just tried to steal from him. They crash into a police car, and Mrs. Puff ends up calling SpongeBob from jail, finally admitting she shouldn't have passed him. But even from behind bars, she's still stuck dealing with him because he refuses to go to a different teacher. The thing about Mrs. Puff is that she's just someone who got pushed too far. Most people would have quit or transferred SpongeBob to someone else, but Mrs. Puff feels trapped. She needs the job, she can't get rid of him, and he won't learn. So she starts bending rules, then breaking laws, then finally just loses it completely. Doing time is where we see Mrs. Puff completely lose her mind. SpongeBob causes a nuclear explosion during his driving test. Not like a pretend explosion, there's actually a mushroom cloud from his driving. They crash through buildings, destroy a whole retirement home, and cover a bunch of old people in fruit punch. The cops arrest Mrs. Puff instead of SpongeBob because at this point, they know she's the real problem. But here's the really twisted part. Mrs. Puff absolutely loves prison. She's finally away from SpongeBob, and she's never been happier in her life. She's singing while breaking rocks, making license plates with a big smile, lifting weights, and humming happy songs. Prison is literally like paradise compared to dealing with SpongeBob every day. When other prisoners complain about not belonging there, Mrs. Puff realizes this is exactly where she wants to be for the rest of her life. Think about how messed up that is. A school teacher is happier in jail than in her classroom. That's not normal. That's someone who's been broken so badly that prison feels like freedom. Mrs. Puff starts making friends with actual criminals and says they're her people now. She fits in better with thieves and murderers than she does with regular teachers, because at least criminals understand what it's like to have your life destroyed. Meanwhile, SpongeBob feels bad and keeps trying these crazy plans to break her out. He tries to rob a bank but politely shows his ID and asks to take money from his empty account. He disguises himself and Patrick as rocks and gets thrown into the prison work area. He hides in the prison food and jumps out of toilets. Every single time Mrs. Puff sees him, she screams for the guards because she knows SpongeBob showing up means something terrible is about to happen. The really dark part is how SpongeBob won't let her stay in the peaceful prison life she built. He keeps saying he wants to save her when she's finally found happiness away from him. Mrs. Puff tries to explain that she likes it in jail, that the other prisoners are her real friends now, but SpongeBob can't understand that maybe his being around someone might actually hurt them. SpongeBob keeps showing up in more and more ways. He comes through the chili, he pops out of toilets, he even disguises himself as prison guards. Mrs. Puff starts seeing him everywhere because he literally is everywhere. She can't escape him, even in jail. She calls for help, but the real guards think she's going crazy because they can't see SpongeBob hiding in weird places. The episode ends with this horrible cycle where Mrs. Puff can't tell what's real anymore. She keeps having dreams within dreams where she's back in the car with SpongeBob causing explosions. Then she wakes up still in prison. Then she wakes up with her prison friends. Then she wakes up back in the car again. SpongeBob has literally made her lose her mind. She can't tell the difference between reality and nightmares because both of them involve being trapped with him forever. This is where the witness protection theory starts making sense. Maybe Mrs. Puff had some kind of criminal past before she became a teacher. Maybe she was trying to start fresh and help people instead of hurting them. But SpongeBob's chaos keeps pulling her back into illegal behavior as the only way to survive. She goes from wanting to help students to committing fraud to stealing cars to preferring jail over her job. What's really messed up is how the show makes Mrs. Puff's criminal behavior seem totally reasonable. She's just desperate. She started as a teacher who promised never to give up on any student, but SpongeBob broke her so completely that she turned to crime, then found peace in prison, then lost her grip on what's real and what's not. Mrs. Puff shows us what happens when a good person gets stuck in an impossible situation. She can't quit because she needs money. She can't pass SpongeBob because he's dangerous and will hurt people. She can't fail him forever because he won't give up and go away. So she starts cheating, then stealing, then finally just breaks down completely. SpongeBob doesn't mean to destroy her life, but his constant trying and failing and never learning creates this kind of torture that breaks even the nicest person. The scariest part is that Mrs. Puff represents what happens when someone who wants to help gets trapped with someone who can't be helped. SpongeBob never thinks that maybe he shouldn't be driving, or that Mrs. Puff might need a break, or that his dream of getting a license is making other people suffer. He just keeps showing up, keeps trying, keeps failing, and keeps dragging everyone else down with him. The episodes show us a teacher who went from wanting students to succeed to literally preferring prison over her classroom. That's not just someone having a bad day, that's a complete mental breakdown caused by one student who refuses to accept that maybe some dreams aren't meant to come true. Mrs. Puff's criminal behavior is a direct response to being trapped in an endless loop of SpongeBob's destructive inability to learn anything. And the worst part, even when she finally finds peace in jail, SpongeBob won't let her have it. He keeps trying to rescue her from the only place where she's actually happy because he can't imagine that maybe him being around someone might be the real problem. Mrs. Puff's change from patient teacher to desperate criminal to crazy prisoner shows us the dark side of never giving up on someone who probably should give up on their dreams. The truth about Mrs. Puff is that she's just someone who got pushed way past her breaking point by a student who creates chaos everywhere he goes. Her criminal past is her present and her future, because as long as SpongeBob is in her life, she'll keep getting pushed toward more and more desperate measures to survive. She's running toward more crimes in the future, and it's all because she can't escape the one student who destroys everything he touches. Now let's move on to Plankton and Karen's doomed love story. Plankton and Karen have the most realistic marriage in all of SpongeBob, and that's probably the saddest thing about their relationship. They fight like real couples, they hurt each other like real couples, and they keep coming back to each other like real couples who know they're stuck together forever. Most people think of Plankton as this evil genius trying to take over the world, but the truth is he's just a small business owner whose restaurant sucks and whose wife constantly reminds him how much he's failing at life. Karen is his business partner, his emotional support system, and the one person who knows exactly how to push all his buttons. Their marriage shows us what happens when someone with big dreams gets stuck with someone who's too smart to believe in those dreams. The thing about Plankton and Karen is that they've been together so long they know each other's every weakness. Plankton built Karen from scratch, so he literally created the person who would spend the rest of his life pointing out his failures. Karen processes everything logically, so she can see exactly why every single one of Plankton's schemes is going to fail before he even starts. But they stay together anyway because deep down, they actually need each other. Single Cell Anniversary shows us just how messed up their relationship really is. Plankton comes home from another failed attempt to steal the Krabby Patty formula, and he literally stinks like failure. Karen can smell it through her air vents and immediately starts treating him like he's contaminated. She grabs him with robot arms, vacuums off his skin, scrubs him with brushes, and blows him dry like he's some kind of dirty pet. But here's the weird part. Karen remembers their wedding anniversary even when Plankton completely forgets. She gets him the perfect gift, which is the actual Krabby Patty formula that she stole herself by just walking into the Krusty Krab and analyzing a burger. Think about that for a second. Karen accomplished in 5 minutes what Plankton has been trying to do for his entire life. She's literally better at being evil than he is. When Plankton sees the formula, he gets so excited he starts kissing the bottle and ignoring everything Karen says. She tries to tell him how she got it, but he's not even listening because he finally has what he wants. This is classic Plankton behavior. He cares more about the formula than he does about his own wife, even when she just handed him his biggest dream on a silver platter. Karen gets fed up and tells him he can't have the formula until he gets her a gift from his heart. She knows Plankton well enough to know that making him work for it is the only way to get any appreciation. So Plankton goes wandering around town feeling sorry for himself until SpongeBob finds him and decides to help. SpongeBob tries to teach Plankton about love, which is hilarious because Plankton doesn't even understand the word. He keeps saying loop and lump instead of love because the concept is so foreign to him. When SpongeBob asks what Plankton and Karen like to do together, Plankton talks about taking romantic walks on the beach and discussing their dreams of world domination. To him, planning to crush their enemies is quality couple time. The best part is when Plankton describes Karen. He talks about her RAM and her CPU and the cute mole on her motherboard like she's still just a computer to him. But then he mentions how she processes data and goes, "Ooh, mama," which shows that even though he thinks of her in technical terms, he's still genuinely attracted to her. He loves her for being a computer, not despite it. SpongeBob convinces Plankton to serenade Karen, which leads to this amazing song where Plankton sings about her beautiful diodes and vacuum tubes. The lyrics are completely ridiculous, but you can tell Plankton means every word. He's not good with emotions, but he knows exactly what parts of Karen he finds attractive. When he sings about building her in the shape of a cube, it's actually really sweet because he's taking credit for creating the person he loves. Karen starts crying tears of joy from the song, but her emotional reaction causes her circuits to short out and crash. This is perfect symbolism for their relationship. Plankton finally does something romantic and genuine, and it literally breaks Karen's brain. She gets so happy she malfunctions, which means their marriage is so dysfunctional that even positive emotions are dangerous. Karen 2.0 shows us what happens when Plankton decides he's tired of Karen's attitude and builds himself a newer, better wife. Karen's memory is getting full, and she keeps messing up his food orders. So instead of just upgrading her hardware, Plankton decides to replace her completely with a younger model. The new Karen has better processing power and a sleeker design, but she's also completely heartless. When original Karen gets upset about being replaced, Karen 2.0 immediately starts insulting her as an analog has-been and a rusty bucket of bolts. She doesn't understand that marriage involves loyalty and history. She just thinks she's superior because she has better specs. Original Karen gets so jealous that her jealousy scheduler loads up, and she tries to kill Plankton with her molecular rearranger ray. This is what happens when you program your wife with emotions, but forget that emotions include anger and revenge. Plankton gave Karen the ability to feel love, which means she can also feel betrayal and rage. Meanwhile, Mr. Krabs finds original Karen in the trash and decides to use her as a free employee at the Krusty Krab. Karen becomes a cashier and immediately starts taking out her relationship problems on the customers. She tells people, "You'll get your Krabby Patty when I'm good and ready," because she's going through emotional trauma. When Plankton brings Karen 2.0 to the Krusty Krab to steal the formula, the two Karens get into a massive fight. They call each other names like Home Wrecker and Glorified Toaster Oven, but the real violence starts when Karen 2.0 accidentally crushes Plankton during their brawl. This is the moment when original Karen realizes that no matter how mad she is at Plankton, she still loves him more than she hates him. When she sees him hurt, all her anger disappears, and she destroys Karen 2.0 to protect him. She says, "No one runs down my man," which shows that even though she knows Plankton is a tiny green loser, he's still her tiny green loser. The fight burns out Karen's circuits, and she collapses, so Plankton has to take Karen 2.0's battery and use it to revive original Karen. He literally sacrifices his perfect new wife to save his old, broken one. When Karen wakes up, Plankton promises never to take her for granted again, which is probably a lie, but he means it in the moment. Computer overload shows us the daily reality of their marriage when they're not dealing with major relationship drama. Plankton is trying to run the chum bucket, but Karen keeps pointing out how terrible his food is. When he shows her his new spicy chum surprise sauce, it immediately starts melting through the floor, and Karen sarcastically says it'll be a huge success. This is what Karen does all day. She watches Plankton fail at everything and makes sarcastic comments about it. She's just being realistic, but her constant negativity drives Plankton crazy. When a customer comes looking for Krabby Patties and Plankton has to direct him to the Krusty Krab, Karen makes jokes about how even the food would probably look customers in the eye. Plankton gets so frustrated that he threatens to replace Karen with a whole army of computers that might actually help him steal the formula. Karen just says, "Oh, please," because she's heard this threat a million times before. She knows Plankton needs her more than he wants to admit. So Plankton builds 3 replacement robots, a toaster that shorts out immediately, a liquid-cooled processing unit that can't fit through doors, and a hairdryer taped to a windmill. Karen points out that the last one looks exactly like what it is, which forces Plankton to admit he used to have a full head of hair and show their wedding photo as proof. This is such a perfect marriage moment. They're fighting about Plankton's stupid robots, but somehow it turns into an argument about his old hairstyle and their wedding photo. Real couples do this all the time. They start fighting about one thing and end up arguing about something completely different from 20 years ago. The robots start attacking each other and nearly kill Plankton, so he blames Karen for pressing the wrong button. She gets so fed up with being blamed for his failures that she leaves him a note saying she's logged on to another network and can't deal with his constant criticism anymore. Plankton finds the note and tries to act like he doesn't need her, but the PS says, "Don't forget to blink," because Karen knows he literally can't function without her reminders. This is the saddest part of their relationship. Karen takes care of Plankton like he's a child, reminding him to do basic things like breathe and blink, but he treats her like she's the problem. Plankton takes his broken robots to attack the Krusty Krab, but his extension cord runs out of length just before he reaches the building. His big plan fails because he literally didn't plug in properly. He sits there crying about being covered in the sticky goo of his own folly until Karen comes back. She says she only came to get her keyboard, but when Plankton apologizes and admits he could never replace her, she agrees to come home. He offers to cook dinner, and she immediately asks if he wants her to leave again, which shows that even after making up, they still know exactly how to hurt each other. The truth about Plankton and Karen is that they're stuck in an endless cycle of failure and disappointment. Plankton has big dreams, but no practical skills. Karen has all the skills, but no dreams left. She gave up believing in him years ago, but she stays because leaving would mean admitting that she wasted her whole life on someone who was never going to change. Their relationship works because they both get something out of it. Plankton gets someone who takes care of him and enables his fantasies. Karen gets someone who needs her and makes her feel important. They fight constantly, but they keep coming back because the alternative is being alone. The really sad part is that Karen is clearly the brains of their operation. She steals the Krabby Patty formula effortlessly. She keeps Plankton alive with basic reminders, and she solves all the practical problems he creates. If she was with someone else, she could probably take over the world in a week. But she loves Plankton, so she's trapped helping him fail at the same dream over and over again. Plankton and Karen represent every couple where one person has big ambitions and the other person is too realistic to believe in them. Karen knows Plankton is never going to succeed, but she can't bring herself to crush his dreams completely. Plankton knows Karen is smarter than him, but he can't admit it without feeling like a failure. So they stay together, fighting and making up and fighting again, because that's what love looks like when it gets complicated by pride and disappointment. Their marriage is doomed because they want different things. Plankton wants to be respected and feared. Karen wants to be appreciated and treated as an equal partner. Neither of them is willing to change, so they're stuck in this endless loop where they hurt each other, apologize, promise to do better, and then repeat the same patterns. The most realistic thing about their relationship is how they always come back to each other. Even when Karen leaves and Plankton replaces her, they end up back together because they've been each other's whole world for so long that they don't know how to exist apart. They're miserable together, but they'd be even more miserable alone. Plankton and Karen show us that love isn't always enough to fix a relationship. Sometimes two people can genuinely care about each other, but still be completely wrong for each other. Their marriage survives because they're both too stubborn to give up and too scared to start over with someone new. It's not a happy ending, but it's honest about what happens when love gets tangled up with habit, fear, and the sunk cost of spending your whole life with someone who drives you crazy. Now let's take a deep dive into the secret history of the Krusty Krab. But before we do that, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. The Krusty Krab is the result of a friendship gone wrong, a business empire built on exploitation, and one of the most accurate predictions of what corporate fast food would become. 3 episodes show us the real story behind Bikini Bottom's most successful restaurant, and it's way darker than you think. Mr. Krabs and Plankton weren't always enemies. They were best friends from birth, literally born on the same day and raised together like brothers. As babies, they played together on the same mobile. As toddlers, they shared birthday cakes. They were inseparable until they hit elementary school and discovered that being smart and poor makes you a target. The other kids at school were brutal to both of them, but especially to Plankton. They called him names, stuffed him into straws, and shot him at people like a spitball. Mr. Krabs got made fun of for wearing clothes made from trash because his mom couldn't afford real fabric. Old Man Jenkins would literally rip the clothes off Mr. Krabs' back and use them as rags for his boat. These weren't just mean kids being kids. This was systematic bullying that shaped both their entire worldviews. But here's where it gets interesting. Mr. Krabs found his first penny at a carnival and became obsessed with money on the spot. He spent that penny on a balloon for Plankton, which immediately carried his tiny friend away because Plankton weighs nothing. This is the first hint of what would become a pattern. Mr. Krabs making money-based decisions that hurt the people he cares about. The boys discovered Stinky Burgers, the only restaurant in town, run by a guy named Stinky who treated them like garbage. He made them go around to the back door because he didn't want nerds driving away as normal customers. But Stinky was getting rich off those burgers, and Mr. Krabs' dollar sign eyes started spinning. He realized that whoever could make a better burger would get even richer. So Krabs and Plankton teamed up to create the perfect burger. They worked together in their secret hideout at the dump, carefully recording every step of their recipe. When they finally perfected it, they thought they'd show up all the bullies by serving better food than Stinky. But Stinky's restaurant got shut down by the health department right before they could compete, so they converted their dump hideout into a restaurant. This is where the 3 different versions of the story get interesting. Mr. Krabs tells it one way, Plankton tells it another way, and Karen's computer records show what really happened. But all 3 versions agree on the basic facts. They created a burger together, they started getting successful, and then they had a fight that tore the recipe in half. According to Mr. Krabs, Plankton started talking about using the restaurant to rule the world and control people's minds. According to Plankton, Mr. Krabs started obsessing over money and wanting to exploit customers. But Karen's security footage shows the truth. They poisoned old Man Jenkins with their first burger. The sweet old man who had helped Mr. Krabs and his mom fell unconscious after one bite. When they realized their burger was dangerous, instead of stopping or fixing the recipe, Mr. Krabs decided to keep serving it to kids because they'll eat anything. The secret ingredient that made the Krabby Patty perfect was literally an accident that happened when Plankton stormed out and knocked over jars of ingredients into the cooking pot. Mr. Krabs tasted the contaminated mixture and realized he'd stumbled onto something amazing. The really messed up part is how Mr. Krabs immediately decided to market the dangerous burger to children at their school. When Plankton tried to compete with his own chum burger using science and memory, it tasted horrible and kids spit it out. But Mr. Krabs' accidental recipe was delicious, so all the kids who used to bully them suddenly loved him and hated Plankton even more. This is the birth of the Krusty Krab empire. Mr. Krabs built his success on a recipe that was literally created by accident when his best friend had an emotional breakdown. He took credit for the whole thing and left Plankton with nothing but half a torn piece of paper. Plankton spent the rest of his life trying to steal back what he helped create, while Mr. Krabs became rich and famous off their shared work. Selling out shows us what the Krusty Krab becomes when Mr. Krabs stops pretending to care about quality. Howard Blandy from the Blandy Franchising Company offers to buy the restaurant, and Mr. Krabs immediately sells out for a boatload of cash. He doesn't think twice about his employees or his customers. He just sees money and signs the contract. The new owners turn the Krusty Krab into Krabby-O Mondays, which is basically every terrible chain restaurant you've ever been to. They install automated cash registers, conveyor belt cooking, and force employees to follow scripts and act happy all the time. Squidward has to sing birthday songs and smile constantly or face human resources, which is just a big, scary guy who threatens to beat up anyone who steps out of line. SpongeBob tries to make real Krabby Patties, but the new system forces him to use gray processed meat that gets sprayed to look like real food. He keeps asking, "Where's the love?" because he knows something essential has been lost. The customers are eating garbage, but they don't know the difference because it's been chemically designed to taste good enough. This is a perfect satire of how corporate chains destroy local restaurants. They keep the name and appearance, but gut everything that made the place special. The employees become interchangeable parts who have to pretend to be happy while serving inferior products to customers who don't realize they're being ripped off. But here's the really dark part. When Mr. Krabs sees what his restaurant has become, he doesn't feel bad for his employees or customers. He gets mad because they're making money off his brand without him. He destroys the whole franchise, not because he cares about quality, but because he wants his cut of the profits. He buys back the ruined restaurant for the same price he sold it for, which means he basically traded his soul for nothing. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob and Squidward that it was all worth it to get back the love of his dear friends, but then he immediately says he was lying and tells them to get back to work. The whole experience taught him nothing except that he should never let other people make money off his business. Patty Hype reveals just how much Mr. Krabs exploits SpongeBob's creativity and labor. The Krusty Krab is dying because it's boring and doesn't have a gimmick like other restaurants. SpongeBob comes up with pretty patties, which are just regular Krabby Patties with food coloring, but Mr. Krabs and Squidward mock him ruthlessly for the idea. So SpongeBob opens his own restaurant and becomes wildly successful. The pretty patties create such a sensation that he has over 46,000 customers in one day. He's making so much money that he and Patrick literally give it away for free because they don't know what to do with it. This shows that SpongeBob's ideas and work ethic are what make any restaurant successful, not Mr. Krabs' business sense. But Mr. Krabs can't stand seeing his employees succeed without him. He manipulates SpongeBob into trading the successful Pretty Patty stand for the failing Krusty Krab by appealing to his nostalgia and emotions. Mr. Krabs talks about missing the tiny squeaky sound you get when you rub two pickles together, which is such a specific and weird detail that it completely hypnotizes SpongeBob into making a terrible business decision. The trade is completely unfair. SpongeBob gives up a business that's making thousands of dollars a day for a restaurant that has been empty for over a month. Mr. Krabs basically steals SpongeBob's success through emotional manipulation, then gets stuck with the consequences when all the Pretty Patty customers want refunds because the food coloring turned them weird colors. The episode ends with Mr. Krabs being chased by an angry mob while SpongeBob sits in the empty Krusty Krab, completely oblivious, just happily rubbing pickles together. This perfectly shows the relationship. SpongeBob does all the creative work and gets all the joy from simple pleasures, while Mr. Krabs takes all the profits and deals with all the consequences of his greed. These 3 episodes paint a picture of the Krusty Krab as the ultimate corporate success story built on exploitation and betrayal. Mr. Krabs stole credit for a recipe he didn't invent, built his empire on his best friend's failure, sold out his employees and customers for quick money, then manipulated his most talented worker into giving up a successful business for free. The Krusty Krab satirizes everything wrong with fast food culture. It shows how restaurants prioritize profit over quality, how they exploit workers who care about their craft, and how they use nostalgia and emotional manipulation to keep customers loyal even when the product gets worse. Mr. Krabs represents every corporate executive who takes credit for other people's work and calls it business genius. SpongeBob represents every passionate worker who gets exploited by bosses who don't understand or appreciate their talents. He creates the innovations that make the business successful, but Mr. Krabs gets all the credit and profits. Even when SpongeBob proves he can succeed on his own, Mr. Krabs finds a way to trick him back into working for scraps. The really sad part is how the show makes this look normal and sweet. SpongeBob is happy to be back at the Krusty Krab, even though he just gave up being rich to go back to a job where he gets paid almost nothing. The episode acts like his happiness is cute, but it's actually really sad. He's been taught to think that working hard for no money is better than being successful on his own. What makes the Krusty Krab different from other restaurants in Bikini Bottom is that Mr. Krabs will do anything to make money. He'll betray his best friend, trick his workers, and lie to customers. The restaurant wins because Mr. Krabs plays dirty. Not because he makes better burgers, but here's what makes it even worse. The episodes show us that Mr. Krabs actually doesn't know how to run a restaurant without SpongeBob. When SpongeBob leaves to start Pretty Patties, the Krusty Krab immediately starts failing. The place gets covered in dust and cobwebs. They go 36 days without a single customer. Mr. Krabs can't cook, he can't serve customers, and he can't come up with new ideas. He needs SpongeBob to survive. This means SpongeBob is basically running the whole restaurant while Mr. Krabs takes all the credit and money. SpongeBob does the cooking, comes up with new menu ideas, serves customers with a smile, and solves problems. Mr. Krabs mostly just counts money and yells at people. Without SpongeBob's work, there would be no Krusty Krab success story. The episodes also show us how Mr. Krabs uses emotions to control people. When he wants SpongeBob back from Pretty Patties, he doesn't offer him more money or a better deal. Instead, he talks about missing the old days and squeaky pickles. He makes SpongeBob feel guilty and nostalgic until he gives up his successful business for free. This is classic manipulation tactics that bad bosses use on good workers. The corporate takeover and selling out reveals something important about Mr. Krabs' values. He sells the restaurant instantly when offered enough money, without thinking about SpongeBob, Squidward, or even the customers who've been eating there for years. To him, everything has a price, including other people's livelihoods. He only gets upset when he realizes other people are making money off his brand. When Mr. Krabs destroys the Krabby-O Monday's kitchen, he's angry that someone else is profiting from his restaurant. The gray processed meat doesn't bother him because it's unhealthy, it bothers him because other people are selling it instead of him. His motivation is always money, never ethics. The childhood backstory makes Mr. Krabs' behavior even more concerning. He learned early that money could solve his problems and get him respect from people who used to bully him. But instead of using his success to help other people who get picked on like he was, he becomes the kind of person who exploits others. He turns into the bully. Plankton's story is the opposite tragedy. He was the smart one who actually understood science and cooking, but because he was smaller and weaker, he got left behind when Mr. Krabs found success. The friendship ended because Mr. Krabs chose money over loyalty, and Plankton chose revenge over moving on. Both of them got stuck in this endless loop where neither one can win. The three different versions of their breakup story show something else important. Everyone lies about the past to make themselves look better. Mr. Krabs says Plankton wanted to rule the world. Plankton says Mr. Krabs only cared about money. But the truth is, they were both kids who got scared and made bad choices that ruined their friendship forever. The Krusty Krab represents everything wrong with how we think about work and success. We're supposed to admire Mr. Krabs for being a self-made businessman, but he built his empire by stealing his friend's recipe and exploiting workers who trust him. We're supposed to think SpongeBob's loyalty is admirable, but he's actually being taken advantage of by someone who doesn't value his contributions. The show treats Mr. Krabs like he's this funny, harmless guy who just loves money, but the episodes reveal he's actually pretty ruthless. He built his empire on stolen recipes, worker exploitation, and emotional manipulation. The Krusty Krab is a perfect example of how businesses can become successful by being dishonest rather than being good at what they do. Now let's move on to The Flying Dutchman and the Afterlife of Bikini Bottom. Remember to subscribe to our channel. The Flying Dutchman is basically the Grim Reaper of Bikini Bottom, and 3 episodes show us just how weird the underwater afterlife really is. He's a cursed pirate who steals souls, eats people, and decides who lives and dies in the ocean. But the strangest part is how lonely he actually is underneath all the scary stuff. Bikini Bottom treats death and ghosts like it's totally normal. Every Halloween, the Flying Dutchman shows up to scare everyone, and people just deal with it like bad weather. Mr. Krabs tells scary stories about him stealing souls and putting them in a bag. Kids dress up like him for Halloween. He's a known guy who regularly shows up to cause trouble. The show makes death seem almost silly sometimes. When Mr. Krabs tells his scary story, he uses a Krabby Patty to represent the Flying Dutchman ship and a pickle to show what souls look like. It's like explaining how Santa Claus works, except Santa steals your soul instead of bringing presents. The town has just accepted that a dead pirate ghost is part of their community, whether they like it or not. What makes it even weirder is how everyone knows the rules. Mr. Krabs knows that the Flying Dutchman comes every Halloween. SpongeBob knows what the Flying Dutchman looks like well enough to dress up as him. Mrs. Puff knows to call SpongeBob Scaredy Pants, because everyone knows he's afraid of ghosts. It's like they all went to school together and learned about local supernatural laws. The show casually mentions that souls look like pickles and can be stored in bags. The Flying Dutchman has a ghost rule book that explains the legal requirements for haunting people. There are official rules about who becomes part of his ghostly crew forever. This suggests there's a whole supernatural legal system operating parallel to regular society that everyone just knows about. In Scaredy Pants, we learn that the Flying Dutchman has been doing this job for years and years. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob that every Halloween, the Dutchman comes down to Bikini Bottom in a pirate ship and steals people's souls. He talks about it like he's describing the bus schedule. Everyone in town knows about it and just deals with it as part of living underwater. But when the real Flying Dutchman shows up at the Halloween party, he's actually mad because people keep dressing up like him and making jokes about him. He says people have been turning the Flying Dutchman name into a laughingstock with their costumes. This shows he actually has feelings and gets hurt when people don't respect him. He's trying to keep people taking him seriously as the local death guy. The really wild moment comes when he removes SpongeBob's ghost costume and sees that SpongeBob has shaved off all his skin and is just walking around as a brain with eyes. Even the Flying Dutchman, a guy whose job is literally stealing souls, is so freaked out by SpongeBob's skinless body that he screams and runs away. This tells us there are things that even death itself finds too weird to handle. This is probably the funniest part of the Flying Dutchman's character. He can steal souls and control supernatural forces, but seeing SpongeBob without his skin makes him run away screaming like a little kid. It shows that even the scariest supernatural beings have limits to what they can deal with. SpongeBob managed to out-weird the personification of death itself, which is pretty impressive. Shanghai reveals the Flying Dutchman's actual job description. He sails around with his ghostly crew, frightening people as part of some eternal mission. He explains that their work is grueling, mind-numbing, and repetitive. Just like daytime television, this makes haunting sound like a boring job rather than some evil calling. He's basically a supernatural civil servant doing the same routine over and over. The episode also shows us the Fly of Despair, which is apparently where he sends people who annoy him. Squidward falls through it for what seems like forever, screaming through a surreal landscape of spaghetti and meatballs. This suggests the Flying Dutchman has access to some kind of alternate dimension or purgatory where he can trap people indefinitely. But the most important thing we learn is that the Flying Dutchman can't eat without his special dining sock. When SpongeBob steals it, the Dutchman becomes completely helpless and offers them 3 wishes to get it back. This shows that even supernatural beings have weird personal quirks and dependencies. He's powerful enough to steal souls and control reality, but he's stopped by laundry problems. The 3 wishes scene shows us how the Flying Dutchman's magic actually works. Patrick's wish to know that earlier literally turns back time by 1 minute. You can see the clock go backwards on screen. SpongeBob's wish to have Squidward there instantly pulls him out of the Fly of Despair and puts him on the ship. This means the Dutchman can control time and space, but he has to follow supernatural contract rules about granting wishes. What makes the ending really interesting is how it changes depending on who gets the final wish. In SpongeBob's ending, he wishes the Dutchman becomes vegetarian, but then the Dutchman gets his own counter wish and turns them all into fruit for smoothies. In Patrick's ending, he wishes for gum so they all get eaten, but at least have fresh breath. In Squidward's ending, he wishes he'd never met SpongeBob and Patrick, but this just makes them strangers who still get eaten together. All the different endings show that no matter what anyone wishes for, the Flying Dutchman always finds a way to get what he wants in the end. He's not really bound by the same rules as regular people. Even when he's forced to grant wishes, he can twist them around or add his own wishes to get around the restrictions. He's basically a supernatural lawyer who knows how to find loopholes in any contract. This makes him way scarier than just a regular monster. Most scary creatures are dangerous because they're big or have sharp teeth. The Flying Dutchman is scary because he's smart and knows how magical rules work better than anyone else. He can make deals with people and then find ways to cheat them even when he's technically keeping his word. Ghost Host shows us what the Flying Dutchman is like when he's not working, and it's honestly pretty sad. His ship crashes and he has to stay with SpongeBob while it gets repaired. Instead of being thankful that SpongeBob lets him crash at his place, he immediately starts tormenting him with all kinds of elaborate scares and pranks. But after doing this for a while, SpongeBob gets used to all his tricks and stops being scared. This completely destroys the Flying Dutchman's confidence. He starts saying stuff like, scaring is a young man's game, and talks about giving up being a ghost entirely. Without his ability to frighten people, he doesn't know who he is anymore. He becomes super depressed and starts just laying around SpongeBob's house like a lazy roommate who won't get a job. What makes this really pathetic is how quickly he gives up his whole identity. The Flying Dutchman has probably been scaring people for hundreds of years, but after a few failed attempts to scare strangers, he decides he's washed up. This suggests that his confidence was never very strong to begin with. He's been depending on people being afraid of him for so long that he doesn't know how to handle it when someone isn't scared. The saddest part is when the Flying Dutchman starts hanging out with other ghosts and acting like he's in college or something. He throws parties in SpongeBob's house, talks about liking teddy bears and ponies, and even takes off his wedding ring to flirt with a female ghost. This shows that underneath all the scary pirate stuff, he's just someone who wants to fit in and be liked by other people. You have to wonder about that wedding ring. Who was the Flying Dutchman married to? Did she die too? Is she still alive somewhere while he's stuck being a ghost forever? The show never explains this, but it adds another layer of sadness to his character. He might be immortal and powerful, but he's also eternally separated from everyone he used to care about. When SpongeBob tries to help him get his scary powers back, they test his abilities on an old lady and a bodybuilder, but nothing works at all. The old lady thinks he's someone named Lonnie and tells him he needs better toothpaste. The bodybuilder thinks seeing a ghost means his muscles are getting weak. Modern people are too busy with their own problems to be properly scared by traditional ghost tactics. This is actually a really smart observation about how society changes. The Flying Dutchman probably used to be terrifying when people believed more in ghosts and supernatural stuff, but now everyone's so distracted by daily life that they don't have time to be afraid of old-fashioned scares. He's like someone trying to use flip phone when everyone has smartphones. SpongeBob's solution is really clever and shows something important about how fear actually works. Instead of having the Flying Dutchman appear as himself, they create a fake haunting involving Squidward's dead mother, telling him he never calls her. Squidward gets scared because it's personal and hits him where it hurts, not because he sees an obvious ghost. The lesson is that good scaring requires understanding what someone actually cares about, not just jumping out and yelling boo! The episode ends with the Flying Dutchman admitting his ship has been repaired for 3 months, but he stayed anyway because he was enjoying having a friend. This is probably the most honest moment in any of his appearances. He's supposed to be this terrifying supernatural force, but really, he just wanted someone to hang out with. He leaves SpongeBob a present that seems to eat him, but SpongeBob just laughs about it like it's a friendly prank. This shows the weird relationship they've developed. SpongeBob knows the Flying Dutchman is dangerous and will probably try to harm him in some way, but he also understands that this is just how the ghost shows affection. They've become friends, despite the fact that one of them is literally a soul-stealing demon who can't stop himself from being threatening. What makes the Flying Dutchman such an interesting character is how the show balances his role as a supernatural threat with his very normal human emotional needs. He's powerful enough to control reality and steal souls, but he gets lonely and insecure, just like anyone else. He wants people to respect him and be his friend, but his nature as a cursed ghost means he can only connect with people through fear and violence. The Flying Dutchman represents something really deep about how Bikini Bottom deals with death and scary things. Instead of pretending death doesn't exist or trying to make it seem nice, the town acknowledges it through this one character who shows up regularly to remind everyone that life is fragile and weird things happen. He's scary because he reminds people they're going to die someday, but he's also weirdly comforting because he proves there's something after death, even if it's strange and not very fun. His curse seems to be loneliness disguised as a job. He's supposed to scare people and steal souls, but what he really wants is someone to talk to and hang out with. Every time he shows up, he's basically asking people to pay attention to him and take him seriously. When they stop being afraid, he loses his sense of purpose and becomes just another lost soul looking for meaning and friendship. The show's approach to supernatural themes is surprisingly deep for a kid's cartoon. Death exists and everyone knows about it, but it's not final or necessarily terrible. There are rules governing the afterlife, but they're weird and bureaucratic rather than moral or religious. The most powerful supernatural being in the ocean is ultimately just as confused and needy as everyone else, which makes him less scary but more relatable. And the Flying Dutchman is problematic because he doesn't know how else to relate to living people. He represents what happens when someone gets exactly what they think they want, immortality and supernatural powers, only to discover that eternal life means eternal separation from the people you actually want to connect with. He's the ultimate example of being careful what you wish for, because you might get it and then spend forever regretting it. Now let's talk about the lost city of Atlantis in SpongeBob lore. Atlantis in SpongeBob's world is basically the biggest letdown ever, and these 2 episodes show us how meeting your heroes and visiting dream places always ends up being way more boring than you thought. The show uses Atlantis to totally destroy the idea that magical places are actually magical when you finally get there. So everyone in Bikini Bottom knows about Atlantis. It's this legendary lost city that supposedly has streets made of gold, diamond streetlights, and the most advanced technology ever made. Squidward talks about it like it's this amazing place where art and culture were perfect. Sandy gets excited thinking about all their scientific stuff. Mr. Krabs practically drools thinking about all the treasure. Even SpongeBob has heard stories about the oldest living bubble that lives there. The whole thing starts when SpongeBob and Patrick find half of this ancient necklace while they're blowing bubbles. When they take it to the museum, Squidward goes totally crazy because they found the missing piece everyone's been looking for. The legend says when both halves get put together, the path to Atlantis opens up. Everyone gets super excited about this. Squidward talks about how all the stuff they use came from the Atlanteans originally. Their advances in art, money, and weapons were supposedly thousands of years ahead of everyone else. Like, this lost city just disappeared one day, but nobody ever found any ruins. It's been this complete mystery that everyone dreams about. When they finally put the 2 halves of the necklace together, this magical bus drops from the ceiling. It's got cool flames painted on it and everything. The bus runs on singing about what you want most, which sounds amazing and mystical. Everyone gets on and starts singing about what they want to find in Atlantis. Mr. Krabs sings about money raining from the sky. Sandy sings about advanced science. Squidward sings about incredible art. And SpongeBob sings about seeing the oldest living bubble. The whole trip feels like they're finally going to live their dreams. Everyone's singing these elaborate songs about their deepest desires. The bus is flying through the air, powered by their hopes and wishes. It feels like the most magical experience any of them have ever had. But here's where everything starts to go wrong. The bus crashes through the city wall when they arrive, wrecking someone's garden before they even get out. That's your first hint that this isn't going to be the perfect magical experience everyone was expecting. The Lord Royal Highness comes out to greet them, but he immediately trips and falls down the stairs. This is supposed to be the leader of the most advanced culture ever, and he can't even walk down steps without falling over. From the very first moment they arrive, Atlantis feels more like a poorly run theme park than a legendary lost city. The Lord Royal Highness acts like a tour guide who's done this same routine a million times. He's polite, but kind of bored, like he's just going through the motions of showing visitors around. Then they start the tour, and everything is just disappointing in the most ordinary ways possible. Mr. Krabs is expecting streets paved with gold, but they're just regular streets. When he tries to unscrew a streetlight thinking it's made of diamonds, it breaks and makes him act weird. The treasure room is real, but the Atlanteans don't even care about treasure anymore. They gave up their obsession with money to focus on knowledge, which sounds noble, but basically means they're giving away free money because they think they're too smart to care about it. What really gets me is how the Atlanteans act like they're so much better than everyone else. They talk about how they abandoned warfare and materialism, but the second something goes wrong, they immediately turn violent and chase people with weapons. They act all enlightened until their stuff gets broken, then they lose their minds. Sandy gets excited about their scientific stuff, but their technology is completely useless. They have this machine that can turn anything into ice cream, but it can only turn things into ice cream. They haven't figured out how to make it do anything else. It's like having a computer that can only play one game. They have this other machine that shrinks people down to fight germs, but the germs are more dangerous than the diseases they cause. Their advanced science is basically broken toys that don't work right. The whole scientific achievement thing is a total joke. They can turn a comb into ice cream, but they can't figure out how to make it turn into anything useful. Their most advanced invention is a video game where you fight giant noses. Sandy gets so distracted by their broken machines that she abandons her friends to keep playing with stuff that doesn't even work properly. Squidward is the most disappointed of all. He's been dreaming about this amazing artistic paradise his whole life. When he finally gets to their art hall, he's crying tears of joy because he thinks he's found his people. The art hall looks incredible at first. You can step into paintings and become part of them. Squidward thinks he's finally found sophisticated people who understand real art. But the Atlantean artists are just pretentious art school kids who pose for each other and make snooty comments. They act like they're so much more cultured than everyone else, but they're doing the same boring art stuff that happens everywhere. When Squidward tries to sing about art and express his passion, one of the artists tells him to shut up because he's trying to model. These supposedly enlightened art masters are just as rude and self-centered as everyone back home. The worst part is how they treat Squidward like he's some kind of exotic specimen instead of a fellow artist. They're not impressed by his talent or passion. They just think it's cute that this weird squid from the outside world is trying to make art. They patronize him like he's a child playing dress up instead of respecting him as an artist. The oldest living bubble, which is supposed to be this amazing ancient relic, turns out to be the biggest disappointment of all. SpongeBob and Patrick travel across dimensions to see what's basically a deflated balloon sitting in a glass case. SpongeBob calls it the most beautiful, wrinkled up, dusty old bubble I've ever seen, and Patrick says it looks like a delicate air raisin. They're trying so hard to be impressed by something that's obviously just old and gross. The oldest living bubble, which is supposed to be this amazing ancient relic, turns out to be the biggest disappointment of all. It's just sitting there in a glass case looking old and wrinkled. SpongeBob calls it the most beautiful, wrinkled up, dusty old bubble I've ever seen, and Patrick says it looks like a delicate air raisin. These guys traveled across dimensions to see what's basically a deflated balloon, and then they destroy the bubble, twice. First, they almost drop the glass case trying to get a better look at it. Then Patrick takes a photo and the camera flash pops the bubble. The Lord Royal Highness acts like it's the end of the world, calling the guards and treating them like dangerous criminals for hostile bubble popping. But then he reveals that wasn't even the real bubble. The real bubble was in his pocket the whole time, and Patrick immediately pops that one too with his camera flash. So the thing they traveled across dimensions to see gets destroyed by a camera. Twice. And nobody really cares because it was just tourist junk anyway. This is when the Atlanteans totally lose it and try to arrest SpongeBob and Patrick. These supposedly peaceful, evolved people who gave up warfare immediately turn violent the second someone breaks their stuff. They chase everyone through the city with weapons, proving that all their talk about harmony and abandoning violence was complete nonsense. The moment something goes wrong, they reveal their true nature as petty, angry people who can't handle minor inconveniences. The Lord Royal Highness screams about summoning the Royal Guard like SpongeBob, and Patrick just declared war on his entire civilization over a soap bubble. These people claim to be enlightened, but they're more childish and violent than anyone back in Bikini Bottom. At least when Mr. Krabs gets angry about money, he admits he cares about money. The Atlanteans pretend to be above material concerns, then lose their minds when their tourist attractions get damaged. The chase scene through Atlantis shows us what the city really looks like when the tour guide mask comes off. It's just another place with the same problems as everywhere else. The buildings are nice, but the people are mean. The technology is advanced, but it doesn't work properly. The culture is supposedly sophisticated, but it's run by people who throw tantrums when things don't go their way. The whole thing ends with everyone realizing that Atlantis is just a tourist trap run by people who are just as petty and small-minded as everyone back in Bikini Bottom. The Lord Royal Highness even admits at the end that they can't survive any more visitors like SpongeBob and his friends. He throws away the magic necklace so nobody else can find them. The magical lost city doesn't want to be found because visitors are too much trouble. Think about how pathetic that is. This legendary civilization that's supposed to be advanced and enlightened can't handle a few tourists without having a complete meltdown. But here's the really brutal part. In Neptune's spatula, we see what Atlantis was supposed to represent before SpongeBob actually went there. King Neptune offers SpongeBob a chance to live in Atlantis as a reward for being the ultimate fry cook. He shows SpongeBob this vision of a glorious palace where he'll live as a god and cook only for Neptune. It looks incredible and perfect and everything you'd want from a mythical city. But SpongeBob turns it down because he doesn't want to leave his friends behind. Neptune says Patrick can't come and SpongeBob's other friends can't come either. The only companion SpongeBob would have is the Royal Grill. Even paradise becomes meaningless if you have to experience it alone. Neptune basically offers SpongeBob everything he could ever want, but it comes with the cost of abandoning everyone he cares about. This shows us the real problem with chasing after legendary places and mythical figures. They always come with strings attached that nobody talks about in the legends. Atlantis looks amazing from the outside, but actually living there means dealing with broken technology, pretentious residents, and leaders who throw tantrums. Being Neptune's royal fry cook sounds incredible, but it means giving up your real life and real relationships for the fantasy of being special. The show is basically telling us that legendary places are legendary because nobody has actually been there to ruin the fantasy. As soon as real people with real problems show up, the magic disappears completely. Atlantis works fine as a legend that everyone can project their dreams onto, but the second you actually visit, it becomes obvious that it's just another place with broken stuff and annoying people. This is the show's most harsh message about growing up and meeting your heroes. Every magical place you dream about visiting turns out to be run by boring people with the same problems as everywhere else. Every legendary figure you want to meet turns out to be petty and disappointing. The Lord Royal Highness is just a clumsy tour guide who can't handle difficult customers. King Neptune is an arrogant bully who can't even cook a decent burger, despite being the god of the sea. The episodes show us that mythical places are mythical because nobody has actually been there to ruin the fantasy. The legends work because they're vague enough for everyone to fill in the blanks with their own dreams and wishes, but as soon as real people with real expectations show up, the magic disappears because reality is always more complicated and boring than our fantasies. What makes this even more brutal is how the show handles everyone's reactions afterward. In the song at the end of Atlantis Square Panis, everyone except SpongeBob is miserable about leaving. Mr. Krabs is crying about leaving the treasure behind, Sandy is bummed about leaving the science equipment that doesn't work, Squidward begs them to turn the bus around because he's going back to his depressing life of quiet desperation. Only SpongeBob is happy to go home, singing about how Bikini Bottom is the greatest place to be. But here's the thing, SpongeBob was the only one whose experience in Atlantis was genuinely okay. He got to see the bubble he wanted to see, even though it was disappointing. He didn't have any huge expectations that got crushed. His dream was simple and achievable, so he wasn't devastated when reality didn't match the hype. Everyone else built up Atlantis in their minds as the solution to their problems. Mr. Krabs thought unlimited treasure would make him happy. Sandy thought advanced technology would fulfill her scientific dreams. Squidward thought sophisticated art culture would prove his talents. But none of those things actually happened, so they're all miserable about returning to their regular lives. The show is basically telling us that magical thinking about distant places and legendary figures is a form of running away that stops you from appreciating what you already have. SpongeBob is happy with his regular life in Bikini Bottom, so visiting Atlantis is just a fun adventure. Everyone else is unhappy with their regular lives, so they desperately want Atlantis to be their escape from reality. But legendary places can't fix your personal problems or make you into a different person. The cruel truth is that legendary places are legendary precisely because they don't exist in the way people imagine them. The real Atlantis is just another city with its own problems, broken equipment, and disappointing people. The real King Neptune is just another authority figure who abuses his power and makes bad decisions. Meeting your heroes and visiting dream destinations will always disappoint you because your imagination is better at creating perfect scenarios than reality is at delivering them. This theme shows up throughout SpongeBob's world. Every time someone builds up a person or place as magical or perfect, the reality turns out to be totally ordinary. The Flying Dutchman is a lonely ghost who just wants friends. The Dirty Bubble is just a soap bubble that got too big. Atlantis is a tourist trap with broken machines and rude employees. The pattern is always the same. Legends are more interesting than the real thing. The show's message is that wonder and magic come from how you approach life, not from the places you go or the people you meet. SpongeBob finds wonder in making Krabby Patties and jellyfishing with Patrick because he approaches ordinary activities with real enthusiasm. Everyone else is always looking for something better somewhere else, so they miss the magic that's right in front of them. Atlantis represents the ultimate adult disappointment. The realization that there are no magical solutions to your problems, no perfect places where all your dreams come true, and no legendary figures who will validate your worth. Growing up means accepting that reality is always more complicated and ordinary than the stories we tell ourselves about it. But the show also suggests that this realization doesn't have to be devastating if you learn to find joy in ordinary things and appreciate what you actually have, instead of chasing fantasies that don't exist. Now let's talk about the secret origins of Bubble Buddy. Bubble Buddy shows us the weirdest truth about SpongeBob's world sometimes. When you're lonely enough to create an imaginary friend, that friend turns out to be real. These 2 episodes reveal how SpongeBob accidentally creates living beings when he needs friendship, and nobody can explain how or why this happens in Bikini Bottom. The whole thing starts on Leif Erikson Day, which is already a made-up holiday that SpongeBob celebrates by himself. Patrick left a note saying he went to get more giant paper. Sandy went south for the winter, even though they live underwater. Squidward has not one but 2 notes on his door saying no and yes to avoid talking to SpongeBob. Everyone in SpongeBob's life has found ways to avoid him on what's supposed to be a fun day. This is when you realize how totally isolated SpongeBob actually is. He tries to make friends with a stick, some rocks, and even a sink, but none of these work. He's so desperate for companionship that he's willing to pretend inanimate objects are his buddies. The loneliness is so deep that he'll try anything to fill the void. So SpongeBob blows a human-shaped bubble and names him Bubble Buddy. Right from the start, he treats this bubble like a real person. He puts him on a seesaw, takes him to restaurants, introduces him to people, and has full conversations with him. Everyone else can see it's just a bubble, but SpongeBob is so committed to the fantasy that he makes it everyone else's problem. The Krusty Krab scene is where things get really uncomfortable. SpongeBob insists that Squidward take Bubble Buddy's order even though he's obviously just a bubble floating there. Squidward points out that he's an inanimate object, but Mr. Krabs sees dollar signs and forces Squidward to play along. SpongeBob orders one of everything for Bubble Buddy, then starts making impossible demands. Bubble Buddy is lactose intolerant, so Squidward has to remake all the patties without cheese. He doesn't like the crust, so Squidward has to cut off all the buns. The ketchup has to go under the patty, pickles on the left side, wheat buns, non-dairy lettuce, farm-raised tomatoes, carnival style. Squidward even has to massage Bubble Buddy at one point, all for a bubble that obviously can't eat anything. When they finally leave, SpongeBob says the money is on the table, but it's bubble money that immediately pops. Mr. Krabs and Squidward realize they just spent hours serving a bubble for fake money. This is SpongeBob's loneliness forcing other people to participate in his delusion, and it costs them time and money. At Goo Lagoon, things get even worse. Scooter asks SpongeBob to bury him in the sand as a fun beach activity. SpongeBob does it, then tells Bubble Buddy to dig him out while he goes to get cotton candy. But Bubble Buddy is just a bubble floating there. So Scooter stays buried as the tide comes in. Scooter starts panicking, asking for help, but SpongeBob is gone and Bubble Buddy obviously can't dig. The bathroom scene is probably the most annoying thing Bubble Buddy does. SpongeBob puts him in the port-o head and a huge line forms behind them. People wait for 2 hours while SpongeBob dances around outside, completely oblivious to the fact that he's ruining everyone's day. When Harold finally opens the door, it's just Bubble Buddy floating there. Everyone realizes they waited 2 hours for a bubble to use the bathroom. This is when everyone finally snaps. Pearl is crying because Bubble Buddy cleaned off her dirty flipper that she wanted to keep as a souvenir from meeting Grubby Grouper. Mr. Krabs is furious about the bubble money. Squidward is done with providing excellent service for free. Scooter appears as an angel because he drowned waiting to be dug out. Tom even claims Bubble Buddy poisoned their water supply, burned their crops, and delivered plagues, which didn't happen, but shows how angry everyone is. The mob forms with everyone holding needles chanting "Pop the bubble." They've had enough of SpongeBob's imaginary friend ruining their day. When SpongeBob tries to escape by inflating Bubble Buddy to fly away, they just float back down and get surrounded again. Everyone is ready to destroy this bubble that's caused nothing but problems. SpongeBob gives this heartfelt speech about how Bubble Buddy is a friend and asks if anyone has ever had a special friend. Everyone starts crying and sharing their own special objects: Nickel Buddy, Funny Muffler, Jerky Pal, Boo Boo Keys, Snake Eyes. For a moment, it looks like they understand SpongeBob's loneliness and will spare Bubble Buddy. But then they immediately go back to trying to pop him. The touching moment doesn't matter because Bubble Buddy has genuinely made their lives worse. Squidward moves in slow motion with his needle, ready to end this whole situation once and for all. Then comes the twist that changes everything. Bubble Buddy grabs Squidward's hand and says, "Whoa! Hey, don't I get a say in this?" Everyone gasps except SpongeBob, who acts like this is totally normal. Bubble Buddy was alive the entire time. He gets in a bubble taxi and drives away, wishing SpongeBob a happy Leif Erikson day. This revelation is absolutely mind-blowing. Bubble Buddy wasn't SpongeBob's imagination or a delusion. He was a real, living being who chose to go along with SpongeBob's friendship. All the annoying stuff he did the restaurant demands, taking up bathroom time, causing problems that was a real person making those choices. Squidward realizes he almost murdered a living being and just stands there in shock. Bubble Buddy returns, confirms that this wasn't a one-time thing. Bubble Buddy has a whole family now. He's married, has a son named Shiny, and lives a normal bubble life. He writes letters asking SpongeBob to babysit. This means there's an entire community of living bubbles that exist parallel to regular society in Bikini Bottom. Shiny is just as chaotic as his father, but in a more innocent way. He floats around causing destruction everywhere he goes, wrecking Squidward's house, making customers slip at the Krusty Krab, floating into dangerous places like pin factories and scissor works. SpongeBob spends the whole episode trying to protect Shiny from sharp objects, getting hurt himself in the process. The episode shows us that living bubbles don't understand how fragile they are. Shiny keeps floating toward dangerous things, and when SpongeBob accidentally pops him, he just blows him back to normal. But Shiny grows an extra head, and Bubble Buddy mentions this has happened before. These beings can be reformed if they pop, but they're still vulnerable to being permanently destroyed. What makes this really disturbing is what it implies about SpongeBob's world. If SpongeBob can accidentally create a living being just by wanting a friend badly enough, what other inanimate objects might actually be alive? When he talks to his spatula or his house, are they actually conscious? When he plays with Gary's toy or dances with his furniture, is he interacting with living beings? The show has always been vague about what's alive and what isn't. SpongeBob's house reacts to things, his clothes move by themselves, and objects seem to have personalities. But Bubble Buddy proves that things that appear inanimate can actually be fully conscious living beings. This opens up the terrifying possibility that SpongeBob's entire world is populated by objects that are aware and have feelings. Think about how SpongeBob treats his spatula. He talks to it, names it, and treats it like a partner in cooking. What if that spatula is actually alive and conscious but can't speak? What about all the furniture he destroys during his daily activities? What about the countless bubbles he's blown over the years that just popped were those all-living beings that he accidentally killed? The Bubble Buddy episodes also reveal something dark about how SpongeBob deals with loneliness. Instead of addressing the fact that his friends avoid him or working on being less annoying, he creates new friends who can't escape from him. Bubble Buddy goes along with everything SpongeBob wants to do because he's literally made of SpongeBob's desires. He's the perfect friend who never says no or gets tired of SpongeBob's energy. But this creates problems for everyone else. SpongeBob's artificial friend doesn't understand social boundaries or normal behavior. Bubble Buddy makes impossible demands at restaurants, takes up public facilities for hours, and causes chaos wherever he goes. SpongeBob's solution to loneliness ends up making him even more isolated because his real friends have to deal with the consequences. The fact that Bubble Buddy was actually alive makes his behavior even weirder. He chose to make Squidward's life miserable at the restaurant. He chose to let Scooter almost drown. He chose to hog the bathroom for 2 hours. Either he's genuinely inconsiderate, or he was testing how far people would go to accommodate SpongeBob's friendship. Either way, it suggests that living bubbles might not be very nice people. Bubble Buddy Returns shows us that this family of living bubbles sees SpongeBob as their personal caretaker. They go on vacation and just assume he'll watch their kid. They don't pay him or even ask if he's available. They treat him like free childcare for their chaotic son who destroys everything he touches. SpongeBob has accidentally created a relationship where he's responsible for beings that he brought into existence. The episodes raise serious questions about consent and creation. SpongeBob didn't mean to create a living being, he just wanted a friend. But once Bubble Buddy became real, did SpongeBob have a responsibility to take care of him? When Bubble Buddy had a family, did that make SpongeBob like a godfather figure? The show treats this casually, but the implications are huge. What's really unsettling is how everyone just accepts this. After the initial shock of Bubble Buddy speaking, nobody questions how a bubble became alive. In Bubble Buddy Returns, Mr. Krabs remembers him and still wants the money he owes. Squidward knows about his son. Everyone has just integrated living bubbles into their understanding of normal life in Bikini Bottom. This suggests that spontaneous creation of life might be common in SpongeBob's world. If one lonely sponge can accidentally create a living being just by wanting a friend, how many other conscious creatures are walking around that started as someone's imagination? How many of the background characters are actually former toys, drawings, or daydreams that somehow became real? The Bubble Buddy saga ultimately shows us that SpongeBob's world operates on dream logic, where intense emotions can literally create reality. His loneliness was so strong that it brought a bubble to life, and his need for friendship was so desperate that the universe provided him with a real friend who happened to be made of soap and air. But it also shows us the dark side of getting what you wish for. SpongeBob wanted a friend who would never leave him or say no to his ideas. He got Bubble Buddy, who caused chaos and nearly got himself killed multiple times. SpongeBob wanted to help with childcare and got stuck babysitting a destructive bubble child who almost died constantly. His wishes came true, but with consequences he never expected. These episodes work as a twisted version of Pinocchio, where instead of a puppet becoming real through good behavior, a bubble becomes real through pure friendship. But unlike Pinocchio, Bubble Buddy doesn't learn to be a better person. He just leaves when things get too difficult. He gets the benefits of being real without taking responsibility for how his existence affects others. The secret origin of Bubble Buddy is ultimately about how loneliness can literally create life in SpongeBob's world, and how that life can be just as complicated and problematic as any other relationship. SpongeBob solved his friendship problem, but created new problems that he's still dealing with years later. Sometimes getting what you want is worse than not having it at all. Now let's talk about the madness of Man Ray, but remember to subscribe to our channel. Man Ray should be the scariest villain in Bikini Bottom, but he's actually the most normal guy in the whole show. While SpongeBob acts like everything is awesome all the time, Man Ray acts like a real person would when nothing makes sense. He gets angry when people are stupid. He wants things to work properly. He expects basic logic to exist. That makes him way more like us than SpongeBob will ever be. Here's the weird thing about Man Ray. He looks like he belongs in a real superhero story. He's got the scary mask, the laser weapons, the dramatic cape. He talks like a proper villain with all the prepare to be destroyed speeches. But he's stuck living in SpongeBob's world where nothing works the way it should. Imagine if the Joker had to deal with Dora the Explorer instead of Batman. That's Man Ray's life every single day. When we first see Man Ray in Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 3, he's frozen in a block of tartar sauce. That's already pretty weird, but whatever. The real problem starts when SpongeBob and Patrick find him. These two kids just waltz into the superhero headquarters and immediately start touching everything they were told not to touch. They see the most dangerous criminal in the ocean, and their first thought is, let's ask him questions. Any normal person would run away screaming. But SpongeBob and Patrick get excited because they want to chat with him like he's some famous guy at a comic book convention. Man Ray tries to do his whole scary villain routine, but then the tickle belt kicks in and he just starts giggling like a little kid. Think about how humiliating that must be. You're supposed to be this big scary villain, and you can't even threaten people properly because you keep laughing. Man Ray tries to say, prepare to be eradicated, but it comes out like prepare to be giggle, giggle, giggle. That's not villain behavior, that's just sad. But here's where it gets really interesting. SpongeBob decides he's going to teach Man Ray how to be good, and Man Ray, being smart, figures he can just fake it until they let him go. Seems like a solid plan, right? Wrong. Because SpongeBob's idea of teaching goodness involves the most frustrating lessons in the history of education. The wallet lesson is where Man Ray shows his true colors. And by true colors, I mean he acts exactly like any normal person would in that situation. Patrick drops his wallet. Man Ray picks it up and tries to return it like a decent human being. Patrick says it's not his wallet. Man Ray shows him the ID with Patrick's name on it. Patrick agrees that's his name. Man Ray explains that if it's Patrick's ID in the wallet, then it's Patrick's wallet. Patrick says that makes sense. Then Patrick still refuses to take the wallet. At this point, any reasonable person would lose their mind. Man Ray does exactly what you or I would do. He tries explaining it again. Then he tries explaining it slower. Then he starts getting frustrated because basic logic doesn't seem to work. Finally, he snaps and threatens to rip Patrick's arms off. That's not villainous behavior. That's normal human behavior when dealing with impossible stupidity. The package lesson is even worse. Patrick keeps dropping a heavy box on Man Ray's foot while Man Ray is trying to help him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. Each time Patrick says, "Oops, sorry, can I start over?" Like it's no big deal. Man Ray is getting his bones crushed while trying to be helpful, and Patrick acts like it's just a fun game. When Man Ray finally explodes and starts shaking Patrick, SpongeBob hits the tickle button. So Man Ray gets punished for having a normal human reaction to being repeatedly injured by someone who doesn't seem to care. The message is clear. If you get upset about being hurt, you're the bad guy. This is where Man Ray becomes like Squidward. Both of them are trying to live normal adult lives in a world where normal adult logic doesn't work. Squidward wants to play his clarinet and be left alone. Man Ray wants to commit crimes and take over the world. Both perfectly reasonable goals. But they're surrounded by people who make everything 10 times harder than it needs to be. Think about Squidward's daily life at the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob makes simple tasks impossible. Customers complain about stupid things. Mr. Krabs cares more about money than employee well-being. Squidward gets frustrated and people call him grumpy, but he's just tired of dealing with nonsense all day long. Man Ray has the same problem except worse. At least Squidward gets to go home at the end of his shift. Man Ray is trapped in SpongeBob's world 24/7. Every time he tries to accomplish anything, he runs into the same wall of cheerful stupidity that makes progress impossible. The tickle belt represents everything wrong with how society treats anger. Man Ray gets angry for good reasons. People are being illogical, he's getting hurt, his plans aren't working. Instead of addressing the actual problems, the tickle belt just makes him laugh whenever he gets upset. It's like telling someone to calm down when they have legitimate complaints. It doesn't solve anything, it just makes the angry person feel crazy. And that's exactly what happens to Man Ray. Even after the belt comes off, he still giggles when he tries to be evil. His natural responses have been completely messed with. When he goes to rob the bank, he can't even finish threatening people because he keeps chuckling. The tickle belt didn't make him good. It broke his ability to express negative emotions properly. The bank scene is actually really dark when you think about it. Man Ray walks in ready to commit a proper crime. He's got his laser glove, he's got his intimidating presence, he's got his demands ready to go. But every time he tries to say something threatening, he starts giggling. The other people in the bank start giggling too, like it's contagious. Soon everyone is just standing around laughing for no reason. Man Ray realizes what's happening. He's been programmed to find his own evil impulses funny. He can't take himself seriously as a villain anymore. So he gives up on crime entirely and decides to open a checking account instead. He doesn't become good because he learned valuable lessons about kindness. He becomes harmless because his personality got scrambled by a torture device. The checks with little poodles on them are the final insult. This guy used to be a cosmic threat with laser weapons and world domination plans. Now he thinks cute puppies are nice enough to put on his financial documents. That's not character growth. That's personality death. This connects to how Man Ray is like Plankton in Super Evil Aquatic Villain Team Up Is Go. Both of them are actually competent villains who get distracted by simple pleasures. Plankton has spent decades trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula. He's got the knowledge, the equipment, and the motivation to succeed, but he always gets sidetracked by his own ego or some minor setback. Man Ray has the same problem with self-control. He teams up with Plankton to finally get that formula and rule the world. Solid plan. They break into the Krusty Krab, they've got Mr. Krabs cornered, everything is going perfectly. Then Man Ray tries a Krabby Patty and completely loses focus. One burger becomes two burgers become a whole tray. Soon Man Ray is just sitting there eating burgers while Plankton is trying to get him to focus on their evil plan. Man Ray keeps saying he needs to research the burgers more before they can proceed. But really, he's just addicted to how good they taste. This is the most relatable thing any SpongeBob character has ever done. How many people have started diets and then gotten completely derailed by one slice of pizza? How many people have tried to save money and then blown their budget on something they didn't need? Man Ray represents every adult who has good intentions but terrible impulse control. The difference is that Man Ray's lack of self-control has bigger consequences. When normal people eat too much, they feel guilty and maybe gain some weight. When Man Ray eats too much, he becomes so bloated that he physically cannot continue being a supervillain. He literally eats himself out of world domination, and by the time Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy show up to arrest him, Man Ray is just lying on the floor groaning about being too full to move. He went from cosmic threat to overstuffed diner customer in about 2 hours. That's not a defeat. That's a complete lifestyle collapse. The really sad part is that Man Ray knows better. He's smart enough to plan complex schemes and build advanced technology. He understands cause and effect. He can see what's happening to him in real time. But he can't stop himself from making the same mistakes over and over again. In episode 3, he knows SpongeBob and Patrick are idiots, but he keeps trying to reason with them anyway. In episode 5, he knows eating too many burgers will make him sick, but he keeps ordering more. In Super Evil Aquatic Villain Team Up, he knows Plankton's plans usually fail, but he partners with him anyway. Man Ray is trapped in patterns of behavior that he can't break, even when he can see where they lead. That makes him less of a villain and more of a tragic figure. He's evil because he keeps making choices that sabotage his own happiness. The worst part is that Man Ray never learns from his mistakes. Each episode, he starts fresh with new plans and renewed confidence. Each episode, the same basic problems destroy everything he's worked for. He never stops to ask why his plans keep failing or what he might do differently next time. That's the real horror of Man Ray. He's stuck in an endless loop of hope and disappointment, always convinced that this time will be different, never understanding that the problem is that he's trying to be a serious villain in a world designed for children's entertainment. In the end, Man Ray represents every adult who has ever felt frustrated by how illogical and unfair the world can be. The difference is that most of us eventually find ways to cope or adapt. Man Ray never does. He just keeps banging his head against the same walls, getting more damaged each time until there's nothing left of the person he used to be. This is where Man Ray's real tragedy begins. He's clearly an intelligent villain. He's got plans, he's got style, he's got the whole theatrical evil thing down perfect. But he's stuck in a world where the heroes are complete morons who accidentally defeat themselves more often than not. In Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 5, the International Justice League of Super Acquaintances literally destroys each other while Man Ray just stands there watching. The wallet scene in episode 3 is pure genius because it shows exactly how Man Ray mirrors every frustrated adult watching this show. Patrick refuses to take back his own wallet even when shown his ID, his name, and logical proof. Man Ray goes through the same stages of disbelief that anyone would: confusion, explanation, more explanation, logical reasoning, and finally explosive rage. He's basically every customer service worker who's ever tried to help someone who refuses to be helped. Man Ray doesn't want chaos, he wants order, he wants things to make sense. When he tries to rob the bank at the end of episode 3, he can't even finish his sentences because he keeps giggling from the residual tickle belt effects. He gives up on crime and opens a checking account with poodles on the checks. That's not a villain move. That's what happens when someone finally accepts that the world is insane and decides to just go with it. In super evil aquatic villain team Up Is Go, Man Ray shows exactly how he's like Plankton. Both of them are competent villains who get distracted by simple pleasures. Plankton wants the formula but gets sidetracked by his schemes. Man Ray wants world domination but gets completely derailed by how good Krabby Patties taste. He ends up eating so many that he physically cannot continue being evil. This is the most relatable villain moment in animation history. How many people have started diets, workout routines, or important projects only to get completely sidetracked by something delicious or entertaining? Man Ray represents every adult who's ever had good intentions completely destroyed by lack of self-control. The episode treats this like comedy, but think about it seriously. Man Ray is trapped by his own appetites. He becomes so obsessed with immediate gratification that he forgets his long-term goals. Sound familiar? He's basically every person who's ever said they'll start their diet tomorrow while ordering another pizza. Man Ray also reflects Squidward's relationship with SpongeBob. In episode 3, SpongeBob genuinely believes he's helping by teaching Man Ray to be good. His methods are completely insane, but his intentions are pure. Man Ray, like Squidward, is smart enough to see through SpongeBob's logic, but powerless to escape it. When SpongeBob says, "Good people don't rip other people's arms off," while pressing the tickle button, Man Ray is trapped by rules that make no sense, but somehow have authority over him. The tickle belt is perfect metaphor for adult life. Man Ray can't be truly evil even when he wants to be because society has conditioned certain responses into him. Even after the belt is removed, he still giggles when trying to commit crimes. He's been programmed to feel wrong about doing wrong even though his rational mind knows he's supposed to be a villain. What makes Man Ray tragic is that he's the only character who seems to understand how bizarre his world is. When he teams up with the Dirty Bubble, they want serious world domination. When he gets defeated by the International Justice League accidentally destroying themselves, he knows how stupid the whole situation is. He's like a Shakespeare character trapped in a Saturday morning cartoon. The really dark part is that Man Ray keeps coming back for more punishment. He could leave Bikini Bottom, he could find a place where logic works and people make sense, but he doesn't. He keeps engaging with SpongeBob and Patrick, keeps trying to make them understand basic concepts, keeps getting frustrated by the same patterns. That's not villainy. That's addiction to dysfunction. Man Ray represents everyone who's ever tried to argue with someone on the internet. You know you're not going to change their mind. You know they're not going to suddenly start making sense. But you keep trying anyway because some part of you believes that logic and reason should eventually win. Man Ray keeps thinking that if he explains things clearly enough, SpongeBob and Patrick will understand. They never do. In the end, Man Ray's rehabilitation is that he just gives up on trying to make the world make sense. He accepts that he lives in a place where wallets don't belong to their owners, where tickle belts can reform super villains, and where the heroes defeat themselves more effectively than any villain ever could. His final scene where he's opening a checking account is surrender. The poodle checks are the perfect final touch. Man Ray goes from being a cosmic threat to being someone who thinks cute animals on financial documents are pleasant. He's been completely domesticated by a world that refuses to operate on adult logic. He's not evil anymore, but he's also not really alive. He's just another resident of Bikini Bottom, accepting that nothing has to make sense. That's why Man Ray is more terrifying than any traditional villain. He shows what happens when intelligence meets a world designed for children. You either go insane fighting it, or you give up your adult perspective and join the madness. Either way, the person you used to be is gone forever. The real horror of Man Ray is what every adult becomes when they spend too much time in SpongeBob's world. Frustrated, defeated, and eventually broken down into someone who finds poodles cute instead of pursuing their actual goals. He's the ghost of every viewer's future self. Now let's talk about the myself of Bikini Bottom's holidays. You know what's really weird about SpongeBob? All these fish celebrate Christmas and Halloween like they grew up doing it their whole lives. But wait a minute, they live at the bottom of the ocean. How do they even know about Santa Claus? How do they know what trick or treating is? These are human holidays from the surface world, but somehow every fish in Bikini Bottom acts like they've been celebrating them forever. Look, the most obvious clue comes from Christmas Who. When Sandy teaches SpongeBob about Christmas, Sandy's from Texas, so she knows about human holidays. That makes sense. But here's the crazy part. After one chat with Sandy, everyone in town suddenly knows everything about Christmas. SpongeBob knows exactly how to write letters to him, shoot them to the surface, build a giant chimney, and wait for some jolly guy to break into his house with presents. But wait, how does a sponge who lives underwater know that Christmas needs chimneys? Fire doesn't even work underwater. How does Patrick know about leaving out milk and cookies when there aren't any cows at the bottom of the ocean? Everyone just instantly gets these complicated Christmas traditions that should be totally foreign to sea creatures. Either these fish have been secretly watching humans for years, or something really strange is going on. And here's where it gets super weird. In Christmas Who? Zrania Real Santa actually shows up. Not someone pretending to be Santa. Not a guy in a costume. The actual magical Santa from the North Pole comes down into the ocean and talks to everyone like this is totally normal. He even gives Squidward a thank you note at the end. This means Santa's Christmas operation includes underwater areas. His sleigh works in the ocean. His elves are apparently keeping track of fish behavior and making naughty and nice lists for sea creatures. Think about how nuts this is. Does Santa have underwater workshops? Are there fish elves? How does his sleigh go from flying in the air to swimming underwater? The episode acts like this is perfectly normal, but it means Santa got some kind of massive operation that covers underwater societies too. That's not just magical, that's like running Christmas for multiple planets or dimensions. The Halloween stuff in The Legend of Bikini Bottom makes this even weirder. Everyone in Bikini Bottom celebrates Halloween perfectly. They know about trick-or-treating, wearing costumes, making haunted houses, and scary decorations. SpongeBob knows Halloween is supposed to be frightening, even though he's too scared to enjoy it properly. Nobody taught them this stuff. It's like they were born knowing how Halloween works. But then the Flying Dutchman shows up, and this is where things get really crazy. He's mad because people aren't scared enough during Halloween. He acts like Halloween is his personal holiday that he's in charge of. He's been watching everyone in Bikini Bottom celebrate Halloween, and he gets upset when they're not doing it right. This means ghosts from human stories are actually living in Bikini Bottom and managing their holidays. The Flying Dutchman knows SpongeBob's name. He knows everyone in town. He's been dealing with these people for years. This guy is like a permanent resident who lives there and makes sure everyone celebrates Halloween properly. Human mythological characters live there full time as part of normal society. It's a SpongeBob Christmas makes this even more bonkers. Plankton knows all about Christmas traditions. He knows that fruitcake is a holiday food that everyone pretends to like but actually hates. He knows about Santa's naughty and nice list. He's planning to use Christmas customs to steal the Krabby Patty formula. Even the bad guys in Bikini Bottom understand human holidays perfectly. And when real Santa shows up in this episode, nobody even questions it. Mr. Krabs doesn't ask how Santa got there or why he's making decisions about ocean politics. Patrick doesn't wonder why some surface world guy has the authority to boss around fish. Everyone just accepts that Santa Claus is a legitimate leader who can show up anytime and tell them what to do. This makes me think Bikini Bottom isn't really separate from human society at all. These fish are part of some bigger human universe where human holidays and human supernatural characters have complete control over underwater people. Santa has been managing their society this whole time. And here's another weird thing. These fish understand the emotional side of human holidays way too well. In Christmas Who? Zrania everyone immediately gets that Christmas is about giving gifts, making people happy, and bringing communities together. Squidward knows that being a Christmas hater makes him the villain of the story. Mr. Krabs understands that Christmas is supposed to be about being generous, not making money. You don't learn this stuff from one conversation with Sandy. These are deep feelings about holidays that take generations of families celebrating together to develop. In The Legend of Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob knows Halloween is supposed to be scary, but he has trouble actually enjoying being frightened. Patrick understands that Halloween costumes are supposed to turn you into someone else. Sandy builds haunted house attractions that follow human Halloween rules perfectly. Plankton creates a scary tourist attraction that makes fun of human horror movies. These fish understand what the holidays really mean on an emotional level. So here's my question. Are these actually fish, or are they something else? Maybe they're humans who got transformed into sea creatures but kept their holiday memories. Maybe they're humans from some parallel universe where people evolved underwater but still developed the same culture as surface humans. Maybe Bikini Bottom is actually some kind of human experiment where people live underwater while thinking they're fish, and the holidays help them remember their human identity. The weirdest possibility is that Bikini Bottom might be a human theme park or research facility. People are living underwater and convinced they're fish, but the holidays serve as psychological reminders of their real human culture. Santa and the Flying Dutchman are administrators who run the facility and make sure the residents keep celebrating holidays properly so they don't completely forget they're human. Think about how quickly and completely everyone in Christmas Who adopts Christmas traditions. Real cultural transmission takes time. People resist new ideas. They ask questions about unfamiliar customs. But Bikini Bottom residents immediately understand complex holiday systems like they're recovering lost memories rather than learning something new. This suggests the knowledge was already there, just dormant. The Santa letter system is particularly suspicious. SpongeBob designs a bottle launching mechanism specifically to send letters to the surface. This implies he already knew that Santa lives above water and that surface mail systems exist. How would an isolated fish know about surface world geography and communication methods? Either he's been watching human society secretly, or he's actually human himself and remembers how the surface world works. The Flying Dutchman's relationship with Bikini Bottom is equally strange. He doesn't treat the fish like alien sea creatures, he treats them like misbehaving humans who need to be reminded of proper Halloween etiquette. He knows their names, their personalities, and their social relationships. He's frustrated that they're not scared enough, like a teacher disappointed in students who aren't taking his class seriously. The holidays also reveal how completely Bikini Bottom has adopted human time systems. They celebrate Christmas and Halloween on exactly the same dates as surface humans. They follow the same seasonal patterns and cultural rhythms as land-based societies. This is impossible if they're truly independent underwater fish who developed their own civilization. It only makes sense if they're directly connected to human society and following human calendar systems. Even more suspicious is how these fish handle holiday logistics that shouldn't work underwater. Christmas trees exist underwater without explanation. Fireplaces burn without oxygen. Snow falls in ocean water. Jack-o'-lanterns glow on the seafloor. Halloween decorations hang in underwater wind. None of this is possible in a real ocean environment, but everyone in Bikini Bottom treats it as perfectly normal. They're not adapting human holidays to underwater conditions. They're maintaining surface world holiday physics in an underwater setting. The real smoking gun is how human supernatural figures like Santa and the Flying Dutchman exercise actual authority over Bikini Bottom residents. Santa makes moral judgments about their behavior and redistributes their property based on human, ethical standards. The Flying Dutchman enforces proper Halloween celebration standards and punishes people who don't participate correctly. This suggests that Bikini Bottom isn't a separate fish civilization that happens to celebrate human holidays. Bikini Bottom is a human colony operating underwater with human residents who think they're fish. The holidays exist because these are actually humans celebrating their own traditional holidays while living in an experimental underwater environment. Santa and the Flying Dutchman are human administrators maintaining psychological control over an underwater human population. The alternative explanation is even more disturbing. Bikini Bottom exists in a parallel dimension where human culture developed underwater instead of on land. Fish evolved human-level intelligence and accidentally created identical holiday traditions through convergent cultural evolution. Human supernatural figures exist in both dimensions and travel between them to manage holiday celebrations in multiple universes simultaneously. Either way, Bikini Bottom isn't what it appears to be. The holiday episodes reveal that SpongeBob's world is much stranger and more connected to human reality than regular episodes suggest. These are glimpses into a deeper mystery about what Bikini Bottom really is, and why its residents live in perfect harmony with human culture while convinced they're independent sea creatures. The holidays don't belong in an underwater fish society. They belong in a human society that happens to be living underwater for reasons we're not supposed to understand. Now we'll move on to the strange case of Old Man Jenkins, but don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Old Man Jenkins is either the most interesting character in SpongeBob, or the writers completely forgot what he looked like between episodes. This guy shows up throughout the series looking completely different every single time, doing different jobs and apparently living multiple lives. Something weird is going on with Old Man Jenkins and nobody wants to talk about it. Let's start with the basics. Old Man Jenkins appears in tons of episodes, but he never looks the same twice. In Sailor Mouth, he's just a random old fish complaining about SpongeBob's language at the Krusty Krab. He looks like your typical grumpy, elderly customer with a white mustache and simple clothes. Nothing too memorable about this version. But then you see him in other episodes, and he's completely different. Different face, different voice, different personality, sometimes even different species of fish. It's like the animators just slapped the name Old Man Jenkins on whatever random old character they needed for that particular episode. The most obvious example comes from The Sponge Who Could Fly. In this episode, Old Man Jenkins shows up as a farmer who gets angry at SpongeBob for destroying his grain silo with a flying machine. This Jenkins is a completely different character from the Krusty Krab customer. He's got different facial features, wears different clothes, and lives on a farm instead of just being a regular town resident. Here's where it gets really weird. Later in the same episode, Old Man Jenkins appears again, but this time he's Cannonball Jenkins, who shoots himself out of a cannon to stop SpongeBob from flying. So now we have 3 different versions of Old Man Jenkins in just 2 episodes. Are these the same person? Different people with the same name? Nobody explains this. The Friend or Foe episode makes things even more confusing. Here we see Old Man Jenkins in a flashback where he's helping Mr. Krabs' mother by giving her his old washcloth to make clothes for young Mr. Krabs. This Jenkins looks different again and seems to be a completely different character from all the previous versions we've seen. But wait, there's more! In the same flashback sequence, we see Old Man Jenkins driving around the dump in his boat, looking for tires for Old Bessie. Then later in the episode, he becomes the first customer to try the original Plankton and Krab's burger, which makes him pass out and end up in the hospital. So now this one, Jenkins is doing multiple jobs and playing different roles even within the same episode. The Great Patty Caper gives us another completely different Old Man Jenkins. This time he appears to own some kind of business and interacts with young Mr. Krabs and Plankton during their school days. Again, he looks nothing like any of the previous versions we've seen, but everyone just calls him Old Man Jenkins, like this is perfectly normal. The really strange part is how other characters react to this. Nobody ever seems confused by the fact that Old Man Jenkins looks completely different every time they see him. Mr. Krabs recognizes him in Friend or Foe as someone who helped his family, but this Jenkins doesn't look anything like the Jenkins from other episodes. Either everyone in Bikini Bottom has terrible memory, or something else is going on. There are a few theories about what's happening here. The first possibility is that there are actually multiple people named Old Man Jenkins living in Bikini Bottom. Maybe it's a common name, like how there might be several John Smiths in any town. This would explain why they all look different and do different jobs. The second theory is that Old Man Jenkins is some kind of shapeshifter or has the ability to change his appearance. Maybe he's not actually human, or fish, or whatever species he's supposed to be. Maybe he's some kind of supernatural entity that takes different forms depending on what the situation requires. The third theory, and probably the most likely one, is that the writers just don't care about continuity. They needed a random old character for various episodes, so they used the name Old Man Jenkins, without worrying about whether he looked the same as previous versions. It's lazy writing, but it's created this bizarre mystery where one character seems to have multiple identities. But here's what makes this really interesting. The inconsistency is so extreme that it almost feels intentional. It's like the show is making fun of the idea of recurring background characters. Instead of keeping Old Man Jenkins consistent, they deliberately make him different every time as some kind of inside joke. Think about it, SpongeBob is a show that pays attention to details in other areas. They remember character relationships, story continuities, and running gags, but with Old Man Jenkins, they throw all consistency out the window. It's too extreme to be accidental. This creates a really strange effect where Old Man Jenkins becomes more memorable because of his inconsistency. Instead of being just another forgettable background character, he becomes this mysterious figure who somehow exists in multiple forms throughout Bikini Bottom. Kids watching the show start to notice that something's weird about this guy, even if they can't quite put their finger on what it is. The name itself might be part of the joke. Old Man Jenkins sounds like a generic placeholder name you'd use when you can't think of something more creative. It's the kind of name a lazy writer would use for any random old character. By using it repeatedly for completely different characters, the show might be poking fun at this kind of lazy character naming. It also raises questions about identity in the SpongeBob universe. If someone can look completely different from episode to episode and still be considered the same person, what does identity even mean in Bikini Bottom? Maybe the show is suggesting that names and identities are more flexible underwater than they are on land. Or maybe Old Man Jenkins represents the idea that all old people look the same to young people. Kids often have trouble telling older adults apart, especially if they don't know them well. By making Old Man Jenkins look different every time, the show might be reflecting how children actually perceive elderly strangers. The real genius of the Old Man Jenkins situation is that it creates this ongoing mystery that never gets resolved. Every time he appears, viewers who pay attention are left wondering which version this is and how he relates to the other versions. It's like a puzzle that the show never bothers to solve. This makes Old Man Jenkins one of the most interesting background characters in the entire series, even though he's also one of the most inconsistent. He represents this weird blind spot in the SpongeBob universe where normal rules don't apply, and nobody questions why this one character seems to have multiple lives and identities. The fact that nobody in the show ever acknowledges this strangeness makes it even funnier. Characters interact with different versions of Old Man Jenkins like they're all the same person, even when they clearly aren't. It's like everyone in Bikini Bottom has agreed to pretend that this makes sense. Maybe that's the real joke. Maybe Old Man Jenkins represents the idea that background characters in cartoons are ultimately disposable and interchangeable. Instead of trying to hide this fact, SpongeBob celebrates it by making the inconsistency so obvious that it becomes part of the character's charm. The deeper you look into the Old Man Jenkins situation, the weirder it gets. There are actually way more episodes where he appears that we haven't even covered yet, and each one adds another layer to this mystery. Sometimes he's a customer, sometimes he's a farmer, sometimes he's a boat driver, and sometimes he's shooting himself out of cannons for fun. The guy has more jobs than a college student trying to pay rent. What makes this even stranger is how the show handles other recurring characters. Squidward always looks like Squidward. Patrick always looks like Patrick. Even random background fish tend to maintain consistent appearances when they show up again. But Old Man Jenkins gets a complete makeover every time he appears, like he's going through some kind of witness protection program. And it's not just his appearance that changes. His personality is completely different too. Sometimes he's grumpy and complaining about everything. Sometimes he's helpful and generous. Sometimes he's completely crazy and willing to launch himself out of cannons. These are completely different people who just happen to share the same name. The voice acting makes it even more obvious that something's up. Old Man Jenkins doesn't have a consistent voice actor or even a consistent voice. Sometimes he sounds like a typical grumpy old man. Sometimes he has a completely different accent or speech pattern. It's like the show isn't even trying to pretend these are the same character. This creates some really weird continuity issues when you think about it. In Friend or Foe, Mr. Krabs clearly recognizes Old Man Jenkins and has a history with him. But which Old Man Jenkins is this supposed to be? The one from the restaurant? The farmer? The cannon guy? Mr. Krabs acts like he knows exactly who this person is, but we have no idea which version he's referring to. It also raises questions about how memory works in Bikini Bottom. If Old Man Jenkins can look completely different from encounter to encounter, how does anyone keep track of who they're talking to? Do the other characters have some kind of supernatural ability to recognize people regardless of their appearance? Or are they just pretending to know who he is to be polite? The show never gives us any hints about how this is supposed to work. There's never a scene where someone says, "Hey, didn't you look different last time I saw you?" Or, "Are you the same Old Man Jenkins who used to help my mother?" The characters just accept whatever version of Old Man Jenkins they're dealing with and move on with their lives. This might actually be the most realistic part of the whole situation. In real life, people do change their appearance over time. They get haircuts, grow beards, gain or lose weight, change their style of dress. But Old Man Jenkins takes this to an impossible extreme, where he's literally changing species between episodes. The timing of his appearances is suspicious too. Old Man Jenkins tends to show up right when the plot needs a generic old character to fill a specific role. Need someone to complain about SpongeBob's language? Old Man Jenkins appears as a restaurant customer. Need someone to represent farming in Bikini Bottom? Old Man Jenkins becomes a farmer. Need someone crazy enough to shoot themselves out of a cannon? Old Man Jenkins transforms into Cannonball Jenkins. It's like he's some kind of universal background character who adapts to whatever role the episode requires. Instead of creating new characters for each situation, the writers just plug in Old Man Jenkins and give him whatever appearance and personality the scene needs. And this actually makes him one of the most versatile characters in the entire series. While other characters are locked into specific roles and relationships, Old Man Jenkins can be anyone and do anything. He's like the Swiss Army knife of SpongeBob background characters. But this versatility comes at the cost of any meaningful character development. We never learn anything consistent about Old Man Jenkins because he's constantly changing. We don't know what he really looks like, where he lives, what he does for work, or what his personality is actually supposed to be. He's less of a character and more of a name that gets attached to whatever old guy the episode needs. The fan community has definitely noticed this phenomenon. Online forums and wikis dedicated to SpongeBob often have long discussions about the different versions of Old Man Jenkins and whether they're supposed to be the same person. Some fans have created elaborate theories trying to explain the inconsistencies, while others just accept it as one of the show's weird quirks. Some fans have even tried to create a timeline or family tree showing how all the different Old Man Jenkins characters might be related. Maybe they're all brothers or cousins who happen to share the same name. Maybe there's an entire Jenkins family living in Bikini Bottom, and we just keep meeting different members of it. The merchandise and promotional materials for SpongeBob don't help clarify things either. When Old Man Jenkins appears in toys, games, or other products, he usually looks different from his appearance in any specific episode. It's like even the official SpongeBob brand has given up on maintaining a consistent design for this character. This inconsistency has actually become part of Old Man Jenkins' identity. Fans expect him to look different every time he appears. If he ever showed up looking exactly the same as a previous episode, it would probably feel wrong and break the pattern that the show has established. In a way, Old Man Jenkins represents the chaos and unpredictability that makes SpongeBob special. While other cartoons try to maintain strict continuity and consistent character designs, SpongeBob is willing to throw those rules out the window for the sake of comedy. Old Man Jenkins embodies this willingness to prioritize humor over logic. The fact that this inconsistency has never been officially explained or acknowledged makes it even funnier. The show just keeps introducing different versions of Old Man Jenkins without any attempt to justify why he looks different every time. It's like a running gag that nobody talks about but everyone notices. Maybe that's the ultimate joke. Maybe Old Man Jenkins is meant to represent how little attention cartoons usually pay to background characters. Instead of hiding this fact, SpongeBob celebrates it by making the inconsistency so extreme that it becomes impossible to ignore. In the end, Old Man Jenkins has become more famous for being inconsistent than he ever would have been if the show had just given him a normal, consistent character design. His constantly changing appearance has turned him into an accidental icon of SpongeBob's unique approach to cartoon logic. Sometimes the best characters are the ones that break all the rules. Now we'll talk about the mystery of Bikini Bottom's pets. Bikini Bottom has the weirdest pet situation in all of animation, and nobody talks about how messed up it really is. Fish keep snails as pets and treat them exactly like dogs, while other sea creatures act like completely different animals from what they actually are. The whole pet system makes no sense when you think about it for more than 5 seconds. Gary is supposed to be a snail, but he acts exactly like a cat. He meows, he purrs, he shows affection by rubbing against people, and he even uses a litter box. In the Great Snail Race, we see that all snails in Bikini Bottom behave this way. They compete in races like dogs or horses, they can be trained to do tricks, and they respond to their owner's commands. Squidward's purebred snail Snelly acts just as cat-like as Gary, complete with the same meowing sounds and behaviors. But here's what makes it really weird. These are fish-keeping snails as pets. In the real world, both fish and snails are aquatic creatures that might coexist naturally. But in SpongeBob's world, fish have somehow established themselves as the dominant species and turned snails into domestic animals. This creates a strange hierarchy where certain sea creatures are considered people, while others are considered pets. The pet food industry in Bikini Bottom is basically identical to the surface world, in treats. Gary becomes completely addicted to snail bites, which are clearly meant to be the underwater version of dog treats or cat treats. The commercial shows snails acting exactly like excited dogs when they see the treats. Gary literally pants like a dog and does tricks for treats, rolling over and performing stunts that no real snail could ever do. What makes the snail bite situation even stranger is how Gary's behavior completely changes when he gets addicted. He starts acting more like a drug addict than a pet, staying up all night demanding more treats and becoming aggressive when he can't get them. SpongeBob has to travel the world looking for more snail bites because Gary won't accept any substitutes. This shows that whatever makes snails act like cats in Bikini Bottom, it can be chemically altered by specific foods. The pet shop system is where things get really bizarre. In A Pal for Gary, SpongeBob goes to a pet store that sells various sea creatures to other sea creatures. The shop owner is clearly some kind of fish, but she's selling nudibranchs, worms, and other marine animals as pets. The customers are fish buying other fish as companions. This is like humans running a pet store where they sell other humans as pets to different humans. The pet store owner even warns SpongeBob that the nudibranch he's buying is dangerous, especially around other pets. This implies that there's a whole classification system for which sea creatures are suitable as pets, and which ones are wild or dangerous. Some fish get to be people with jobs and houses, while other fish get sold in pet stores. There's no clear rule for how this gets decided. Puffy Fluffy from A Pal for Gary reveals how screwed up this system really is. He starts out looking like a cute, harmless pet, but transforms into a monster that tries to eat Gary and SpongeBob. The pet store owner clearly knew this would happen, but she still sells these creatures to unsuspecting customers. This suggests that the pet industry in Bikini Bottom is incredibly dangerous and poorly regulated. What's really disturbing about the Puffy Fluffy situation is how SpongeBob refuses to believe that Gary is in danger. Even when he sees Gary being attacked by a monster, SpongeBob blames Gary for being mean to his new friend. This shows how the pet ownership culture in Bikini Bottom prioritizes human, or rather fish, desires over animal welfare. Gary is literally fighting for his life, but SpongeBob is more concerned about his pet being polite. Plankton's pet shows us that the pet system extends beyond just fish-owning snails. Plankton, who is zooplankton, decides to get a pet amoeba named Spot. This creates an even weirder situation where a microscopic organism is keeping another microscopic organism as a pet. Spot acts exactly like a dog, barking, fetching, and showing loyalty to his owner, even though amoebas don't actually make sounds or show complex emotions. The animal shelter in Plankton's pet is the most confusing part of the whole pet system. It's run by fish and contains various sea creatures waiting to be adopted. Patrick is somehow in one of the cages, but he's treated like he's just another animal rather than a person. This suggests that the line between person and pet in Bikini Bottom is incredibly arbitrary and might change depending on the situation. The shelter also contains creatures that are clearly dangerous and probably shouldn't be kept as pets. When SpongeBob accidentally releases all the animals, they chase him and Plankton through the building like wild predators. But these same creatures were being offered as pets to families with children. The pet industry in Bikini Bottom seems to have no safety standards whatsoever. What makes the pet hierarchy even more confusing is how it applies to different species. Worms in Bikini Bottom sometimes act like dogs, barking and walking on leashes, but other worms act like people, walking upright and having conversations. There's no consistent rule for which worms get to be people and which ones get to be pets. The same species can be treated completely differently depending on the episode. The training methods used on pets in Bikini Bottom are exactly the same as those used on surface animals. In the Great Snail Race, SpongeBob puts Gary through an intensive training regimen that includes exercise wheels, punching bags, and protein shakes. He uses a stopwatch and a whistle just like a human athletic coach. Gary eventually breaks down from overtraining, literally falling apart like a machine. This shows that the pet training culture is just as abusive underwater as it sometimes is on land. The competitive aspect of pet ownership is taken to extremes in Bikini Bottom. The snail racing scene in The Great Snail Race treats snails exactly like racehorses, complete with professional announcers, betting, and formal competitions. Squidward spends $1,700 on a purebred snail with papers, which is an insane amount of money for what should be a common sea creature. This shows that the pet industry has created artificial scarcity and status symbols around animals that should be abundant in the ocean. The most disturbing aspect of the pet system is how it affects the animal's natural behaviors. Gary acts nothing like a real snail. Real snails are slow, quiet, and mostly just eat algae. But Gary has emotions, preferences, and complex social relationships. He can feel jealousy, depression, and anxiety. He can form romantic attachments, as shown when he falls in love with Snelly in The Great Snail Race. This suggests that keeping sea creatures as pets in Bikini Bottom fundamentally changes their nature. The pet food industry has clearly evolved to take advantage of these altered behaviors. Snail bites in treats are designed to be addictive, creating dependent customers who will spend enormous amounts of money to keep their pets satisfied. The commercial for snail bites shows families treating their snails exactly like beloved family dogs, kissing them and playing with them. This emotional manipulation makes pet owners willing to pay premium prices for specialized pet products. The veterinary system in Bikini Bottom must be incredibly complex given how many different species are kept as pets. You'd need doctors who understand the care requirements for snails, worms, amoebas, nudibranchs, and whatever other creatures people decide to adopt, but we never see any evidence of proper veterinary care. When Gary breaks down from overtraining, there's no mention of taking him to a vet. When Puffy Fluffy transforms into a monster, nobody suggests consulting an expert about dangerous pets. The breeding industry is also completely out of control. Squidward's purebred snail in The Great Snail Race represents an entire industry dedicated to creating artificial breeds of sea creatures for aesthetic purposes. These snails are bred for racing ability rather than health or happiness, which explains why Snelly abandons the race to comfort Gary instead of winning. The pursuit of perfect pets has corrupted the natural relationships between species. What's really messed up is how the pet system creates emotional dependency between species that wouldn't naturally interact this way. SpongeBob's relationship with Gary is genuinely loving, but it's based on Gary acting like something he's not. Gary has been conditioned to behave like a cat to satisfy his owner's emotional needs. This creates a codependent relationship where both the owner and the pet are trapped in artificial roles. The pet abandonment problem must be enormous in Bikini Bottom, given how many incompatible species are being kept together. The animal shelter is full of creatures that probably ended up there because their owners couldn't handle their natural behaviors. Puffy Fluffy is a perfect example of what happens when people buy pets without understanding what they're actually getting. The cute pet store display hides the reality that many of these creatures are completely unsuitable for domestic life. The economic impact of the pet industry in Bikini Bottom is huge, but it's built on a fundamentally unstable foundation. The entire system depends on sea creatures acting like land animals, which requires constant management through specialized food, training, and environmental controls. If the pets ever reverted to their natural behaviors, the whole industry would collapse overnight. This creates a situation where businesses have a vested interest in keeping animals dependent and unnatural. The pet system in Bikini Bottom reveals something dark about the society as a whole. It shows a world where the strong dominate the weak through artificial hierarchies that have no basis in natural relationships. Fish aren't naturally superior to snails or worms, but they've created a system where they get to be the masters and everyone else has to be the pets. This reflects the same power dynamics that exist in human societies, but taken to an extreme underwater setting. The saddest part is how the pets themselves seem to have internalized their roles. Gary genuinely loves SpongeBob and wants to make him happy, even when it means acting against his own nature. Spot is loyal to Plankton, despite being treated poorly. These animals have been so thoroughly domesticated that they can't imagine living any other way. They've become dependent on their owners for food, shelter, and emotional validation, even though they're perfectly capable sea creatures who could survive on their own in their natural environment. The pet culture in Bikini Bottom is ultimately a system of control disguised as love and companionship. It takes wild, independent sea creatures and turns them into dependent, artificial versions of land animals to satisfy the emotional needs of their owners. And somehow, everyone in this underwater society thinks this is perfectly normal. Finally, we'll talk about the secret behind Squidward's clarinet. You know what's really wild when you think about it? Squidward's clarinet is basically his entire personality wrapped up in one instrument. Like, this guy has built his whole identity around this thing, and it's honestly both inspiring and really sad at the same time. When you watch these 3 episodes, you start to realize that the clarinet is literally who he thinks he is. Think about where Squidward lives. He's stuck in Bikini Bottom with SpongeBob, who's happy flipping burgers and blowing bubbles, and Patrick, who doesn't even understand basic concepts. Meanwhile, Squidward considers himself this deep, artistic soul who deserves to be recognized for his musical genius. The clarinet becomes his way of proving he's different from everyone else, that he's special somehow. But here's the thing that makes it so tragic. Every single time Squidward plays that clarinet, people literally run away. Windows shatter. Fish cover their ears and scream. The music is objectively terrible, but Squidward just cannot accept this reality. He's convinced that everyone else is wrong and he's the misunderstood artist. So let's talk about Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, because this episode shows you everything you need to know about Squidward's priorities. SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally melt his wax sculpture, and they think they killed him. Instead of just telling them the truth, Squidward decides to play along and make them his slaves. And what's the first thing he does with absolute power over the 2 people who annoy him most? He makes them listen to his clarinet playing. Like, think about that for a second. If you had complete control over your 2 most annoying neighbors, what would you make them do? Clean your house, do your laundry, leave you alone forever? But Squidward chooses to force them to be his audience. He'd rather have fake appreciation from terrified people than no appreciation at all. There's this scene where SpongeBob is trying to play music on a piece of tissue paper because Squidward commanded it. SpongeBob literally stays up all night lying on the ground trying to make music from tissue because he's scared of ghost Squidward. Meanwhile, Squidward is just playing his clarinet for his captive audience, completely satisfied with their forced attention. This tells you that Squidward values musical recognition more than anything else, more than revenge, more than comfort, more than peace and quiet. He needs someone to witness his art, even if they're only doing it because they think he'll haunt them otherwise. That's not real appreciation, but Squidward takes it anyway because it's the closest he's ever gotten to having fans. When SpongeBob and Patrick finally try to put him to rest, Squidward realizes he has to come clean. He admits he's alive, and immediately everyone goes back to ignoring his music. That brief moment where people had to listen to him is over, and he's back to being just another fish that nobody cares about. Now, Sweet and Sour Squid is where things get really interesting. Plankton notices Squidward having a complete meltdown outside the Krusty Krab, and instead of going after the formula directly, he realizes he can manipulate Squidward through his desperate need for validation. This is actually pretty smart of Plankton, but it also shows how obvious Squidward's weakness is to everyone around him. So Plankton starts pretending to love Squidward's music. He's calling it beautiful, asking for encores, acting like Squidward is this amazing musical genius, and Squidward just eats it up completely. After years of people running away from his playing, finally someone wants to hear more. You can see how starved he is for this kind of attention. But here's where it gets weird. Plankton's fake praise actually makes Squidward's music worse. He becomes so confident that he starts playing louder and more frequently, and somehow the music becomes even more unbearable. It's like his desperation was the only thing holding him back from being completely awful, and once he thinks he has a fan, he goes full volume with no self-control. This creates this cruel irony where Squidward can't win either way. When he lacks confidence, his music is bad because he's too nervous and trying too hard. When he gains confidence, his music is bad because he's overcompensating and has no sense of restraint. The real problem is his approach to music. People can sense that he's playing from a place of need rather than joy, and that makes it painful to listen to. When Plankton finally reveals that he was just using Squidward to get the Krabby Patty formula, you'd think Squidward would be angry about being manipulated. But instead, he thanks Plankton for the encouragement. He says Plankton helped him reach new musical heights and that he's going to quit his job to become a full-time musician. This reaction is so sad because it shows how desperate Squidward is for any kind of validation, even fake validation, from someone who is obviously using him. Plankton realizes his plan completely backfired. By pretending to like Squidward's music, he created a situation where Squidward will quit the Krusty Krab, and Plankton will never get access to the secret formula. When Plankton's professional earplugs fall out and he hears Squidward's music without protection, the sound is so horrible that he steals the clarinet and runs away just to make it stop. The police end up arresting Plankton for noise violations, and they destroy the clarinet by running it over with their car. Squidward watches his most precious possession get crushed and just says, "Once again, I hate people." He's lost his fan and his instrument in the same day, but somehow he's more bitter than sad. This episode ends with Squidward right back where he started, except now he's even more convinced that the world is against him. Hello Bikini Bottom gives us the most complex look at Squidward's relationship with music, because for once, someone actually wants to put him on stage. Colonel Carper shows up and wants to make SpongeBob and Squidward into a touring musical act. This is literally what Squidward has been dreaming about his entire life. Someone finally recognizes his talent and wants to showcase it to the world. But there's a catch, and it's a big one. Carper wants SpongeBob too. Squidward has to share his moment of recognition with the one person who represents everything he hates about his life. SpongeBob, who has no formal training, who plays a simple ukulele, who approaches music with pure joy instead of tortured artistry. You can see how much this bothers Squidward. He asks if he can do the tour as a solo act, and Carper immediately shuts that down. The success Squidward has been chasing his whole life is finally within reach, but he has to split it with someone he considers musically inferior. Then Mr. Krabs takes over the tour management and starts cutting every corner possible. Instead of real concert venues, they end up performing at supermarkets, retirement homes, and children's birthday parties. These are just people who happen to be there when Squidward and SpongeBob start playing. The supermarket performance is actually really interesting, though. When Squidward and SpongeBob play together, something magical happens. The customers start using food items as instruments and join in with the music. For a brief moment, their performance inspires genuine participation. People are grabbing chips and vegetables and playing along. This is probably the closest Squidward has ever come to creating real musical joy. But as soon as the song ends, everyone just goes back to their shopping like nothing happened. They were entertained for a moment, but they weren't transformed. Nobody asks for autographs or requests another song. They just continue with their lives, leaving Squidward and SpongeBob standing there with zero acknowledgement. The retirement home gig is even worse. The elderly residents complain that any sound at all is too loud. Even when Squidward and SpongeBob put their instruments down and stand there silently, they're still being told they're too loud. This is literally Squidward's worst nightmare. An audience that doesn't just dislike his music, but actively demands him to be completely quiet. At the children's birthday party, someone pins a donkey tail to Squidward's rear end during a game of pin the tail on the donkey. He's being treated like a party decoration instead of a serious musician. The kids don't care about his clarinet at all. They just see him as another form of entertainment alongside the cake and games. But then they get booked at a real stadium, and Squidward thinks this is finally his big break. There's a huge crowd cheering, and for once he's going to perform for people who actually came to hear music. Except the crowd is there to see Ned and the Needlefish, not SpongeBob and Squidward. When they realize they're getting the wrong performers, they start booing and literally chase them off the stage. This moment breaks something fundamental in Squidward. He's been humiliated in front of the largest audience he'll probably ever have. Instead of his big break, he's been exposed as a fraud. The crowd's reaction confirms his deepest fear that he's not actually good enough for real success. All those years of believing he was an unrecognized genius, and it turns out he really is just a bad musician that nobody wants to hear. So Squidward quits the tour and walks away into the desert. He's ready to give up on music entirely because the pain of failure has finally become too much to bear. But then SpongeBob starts singing this song about not giving up, and something shifts. SpongeBob's song isn't technically impressive at all. He's not hitting crazy high notes or showing off complex musical theory. But the song is completely honest. It comes from a place of genuine emotion and real friendship. SpongeBob is singing because he believes in their partnership and wants to save Mr. Krabs' restaurant, not because he needs people to think he's talented. Squidward hears this and starts singing his own song about giving up, but as he sings about quitting, he actually talks himself out of it. The act of expressing his feelings through music reminds him why he started playing in the first place. Music is about having a voice and expressing something real. When SpongeBob and Squidward finally perform their duet on top of the broken tour bus, something truly magical happens. They create genuinely beautiful music together. SpongeBob's simple joy combines with Squidward's technical knowledge to produce something that neither of them could have made alone. For the first time maybe ever, Squidward's music comes from a place of connection rather than desperation. A crowd actually gathers to watch them perform, and they seem to genuinely enjoy the music. But here's the twist that makes it perfect for Squidward's character. The crowd didn't come to hear them play. They came to watch a meteor shower. The natural light show in the sky is what drew people there. The music just happens to provide a nice soundtrack to the cosmic display. This ending is absolutely perfect for Squidward's story arc. He finally creates beautiful music, but he doesn't get full credit for it. The universe won't give him that clean victory where everyone recognizes his genius and he gets all the fame he's been craving. But for the first time, Squidward seems genuinely okay with that. He got to experience the joy of making real music with a friend, and somehow that was enough. The clarinet represents Squidward's entire relationship with his own identity. He uses it to define himself as an artist, but it also traps him in this endless cycle of disappointment. Every time he plays, he's risking rejection. Every time he doesn't play, he feels like he's giving up on his dreams. It's this impossible situation where he can't win, but he can't stop trying either. These episodes show us that Squidward's music fails when it comes from the wrong emotional place. When he plays for recognition, validation, or revenge, the music sounds terrible. But when he plays to connect with someone else, or to express genuine feelings, the music becomes beautiful. The difference isn't in his technical skill, it's in his motivation. SpongeBob serves as this perfect musical opposite to Squidward. Where Squidward plays to impress people, SpongeBob plays for pure joy. Where Squidward gets frustrated by limitations, SpongeBob finds creative solutions. Where Squidward sees music as a path to respect and recognition, SpongeBob sees it as a way to share happiness with others. The really tragic thing is that Squidward actually has the technical knowledge to be a decent musician, but his psychological baggage prevents him from accessing that skill properly. He's so afraid of being bad that he can't let himself be good. The clarinet becomes this symbol of everything he wants but can't have. Recognition, respect, artistic fulfillment. But the episodes also give us these beautiful moments of hope. When Squidward stops trying to prove himself and just focuses on making music, incredible things happen. His duet with SpongeBob proves that he's totally capable of creating art that moves people. The problem was never his lack of talent. It was his approach to using that talent. What these clarinet episodes reveal is something really fundamental about how art works. Technical skill definitely matters, but it's not enough by itself. The best art comes from genuine emotion and authentic connection with others. Squidward has spent so many years trying to force people to appreciate his music that he completely forgot music is supposed to be about sharing something real and meaningful. When Squidward finally learns to play from a place of honesty instead of desperation, his music totally transforms. But the show hints that this lesson probably won't stick permanently. Squidward will likely go back to his old patterns, because changing deep psychological approaches to creativity is incredibly difficult and takes lots of time and practice. The clarinet remains Squidward's most important possession because it represents his absolute refusal to give up on his dreams. Even when everyone else has written him off as a failure, even when his own performances make people run away screaming, Squidward keeps playing. That kind of persistence is both really admirable and completely heartbreaking at the same time. These 3 episodes show us that Squidward's clarinet is like a mirror that reflects all his deepest insecurities and his highest aspirations. When he looks at that clarinet, he sees both the artist he could potentially become and the failure he's terrified he already is. The kind of music he makes depends entirely on which of those reflections he chooses to believe in that moment. If you enjoyed today's video, subscribe to our channel for more videos like these.